On one of the unfavorable days in Shinye County, in the settlement of Klasanu-Geni, a weak child was born. Once again, one of the best doctors examined his health. He sighed with relief, and his father asked about his son's condition. The doctor said that with such health, the child would hardly be able to live to at least 20 years old. His father, the patriarch of the Zhangdemeng clan, believed that this was heavenly punishment, as his mother had died during childbirth. However, the doctor only gave a displeased sigh. "I can't even believe you're saying that in front of a doctor," he said. He also couldn't understand how a father could say such things about his own child, who would die young. The doctor thought it was a rupture of the 9-yin meridian because he had never seen such an open Baihui point before. After all, if the Baihui point is too open, it indicates the approach of death, although in some circles it was called a resurrection to the immortal. Isn't this a Taoist concept where monks with a high level of practice pass into the world of immortals? The father wondered. But the doctor couldn't believe he really believed it. "I don't know if you've heard of absolute martial arts masters who use the upper meridian of the head, but they are the ones who actively work with the Baihui point," the doctor said. This so-called ascension of the immortal occurs when someone is overwhelmed by the energy of nature emanating from the sky and earth and dies unable to cope with it. After his words, the father looked at his son with an expression of sadness and anger. After that, he turned sharply away from him. "Of course, I'm right after all. This is heaven's punishment," the father said firmly. After that, he dismissed the doctor, saying that the manager would pay him for his services. But the doctor refused and left, full of anger, because he could not understand how the man could call himself a father after such a thing. The child was born into a hated world, where she would either become a demon or be able to master 72 special training methods in 2 years. The doctor was sure that he would die young in this remote area, unless he himself learns to achieve enlightenment. 15 years passed, and the Zheng clan celebrated their youngest son's joining the sect. The whole family gathered at the family table, and the father stood up to make a toast. He was very happy and proud that his son had followed in his late father's footsteps and joined the sect. The brothers and sisters congratulated him on such a great achievement and were sincerely happy for him, after which the father raised his glass and respectfully began to drink. But suddenly everyone turned their attention to the chair, which stood empty, without any presents. This was the place that was meant for John Yon-song. "I told him to stay on the training ground," his father said sternly and seriously. He believed that it was better for him not to appear on such a joyful event, because he would only bring misfortune. At that time, a tense training atmosphere prevailed in the training hall. Zhang Yong-sung trained day after day, honing his skills to perfection. The energy he displayed could be felt, it had incredible power. And finally, he fully mastered the art of movement of the Zheng clan. Thanks to this technique, his muscles have become so strong and contracted that it is difficult for his body to become stronger than it is now, and he hoped that this would allow him to live a little longer. A conversation with his brother surfaced in his memories when he told him that he had changed the traditional martial art of their clan, after which the brother looked at Enshin with sadness. But sighing, he turned to him and asked him to understand him correctly. He didn't need anyone to find out about it. "Why?" Enshin looked at him incomprehensibly. After which he remembered the words of another brother when he said that he would not learn his martial art because he was afraid of the irreparable. And again he couldn't understand why he was refusing like that. After that, his father appeared before his eyes in his memories, shouting at him that he had imagined himself to be the founder of the clan. And at that moment he realized that fate had been cruel to him since birth, and his family had treated him with disdain. Even so, the young man possessed exceptional skills that helped him create his own martial art. But he never considered himself that way, and in general, he didn't assume much when he created the technology. And he just wanted to be happy, wanted to be healthy and live together with everyone. Suddenly, his thoughts were distracted by the noise on the street, because today was the day when a martial arts master from the Zhongnan sect was supposed to visit them. Zhongnan sect, one of the 9 major sects, is also known as the strongest school in Shanxi province, along with Huashan sect. This is a place where you can meet sword deities, but Enshin wanted to meet them in person. But in these thoughts, he remembered asking one of the servants why he was forbidden to show his face to important clans. "This is my father's order, right?" he said. To which the servant only sighed and said that he felt very sorry for the third young master. These thoughts consumed him from the inside. He did not understand why and for what reason all this was happening to him. After that, he decided to look from the sidelines because he was sure that everything would be fine. At that time, everyone was eagerly awaiting the guest. They couldn't wait to find out who exactly would come. After all, if such people really visited them, it would be a great honor for them. Everyone stood in incredible tension, gripped by excitement. "They're here!" Everyone started shouting loudly. Finally, the martial arts masters of the Jongnan sect arrived. A beautiful girl and her servants began to emerge from the carriage. Everyone was stunned by what they saw, their eyes wide open in amazement, and they couldn't believe what was happening before them. After all, this girl was from a noble family, and her appearance undoubtedly indicated a high origin, which impressed those present even more. Books say about the noble family that it is a mysterious clan that can exist forever, and to people they seem like deities. And this energy around her, the internal energy compressed in the body, flows from her naturally. Everyone was speechless when they saw her. So incredible was her appearance that no one could utter a word. "Your visit to our humble clan is a great honor for us," the patriarch said nervously, trying to hide the excitement in his voice. After that, he introduced himself to her and solemnly greeted her, bowing respectfully. Ye Il-shin also greeted, introduced herself, and thanked them for such a warm and respectful welcome. When he realized that he was facing a woman of noble lineage, the Jongnan sect elder began to visibly become nervous, but apologized for not recognizing her right away. Ta Il-shin asked to raise her head, noting that she was not here to show off her position. The patriarch apologized again for his disrespect, noting that they had come such a long way, and he was still keeping them outside, after which he respectfully invited them inside. A noble person and also an elder of the sect, how long does she live? Enshin thought to himself. Meanwhile, the elder followed the patriarch inside. She passed by and people bowed to her, and she looked carefully at each of them, after which their gazes crossed with Enshin. Enshin, noticing her gaze, greeted her a little embarrassedly and paid his respects, bowing respectfully. After that he left, and the patriarch, addressing the guest, said that this was his third son, pointing to Enshin. "He has a clear gaze, he looks intelligent," she said, carefully examining Enshin. The patriarch apologized, as he considered him ill-mannered, but his words surprised the elder. But the patriarch believed that he was bringing problems to their clan. At that time, Enshin returned to the training room, motivated because he had a new goal. After mastering the art of movement of the Zheng clan, he had nowhere to grow and wondered what he should do. But after meeting the elder, he had a new goal. His eyes lit up. After which he immediately started training. At that time, the servant and the elder were discussing the Zheng clan in their chambers, because this place was better than they thought. With so much earth energy, the School of Mighty Sword will definitely want this place for itself. They will definitely come here, so they need to plan a counterattack, otherwise the clan will suffer many casualties, Il-shin said. The servants suggested attacking and killing them all before they could cross the walls. Il-shin thought it wasn't a bad idea, but they couldn't. 13 heavens among them, the School of the Mighty Sword is the most problematic. The elder asked the servants to be more vigilant and keep the sword's aura sharp. After which she calmly continued to drink her tea and thought, delving into her thoughts. She kept thinking about Enshin because it seemed to her that he stood out among the others, and something about him attracted her attention. Evening had fallen, and the lights were on in the windows of the training hall. Enshin continued to train, controlling his energy and delving into meditation, seeking harmony between body and spirit. Although he found it strange that his Baihui point was so strongly opened, despite the fact that he had not meditated for a year, as he was completely focused on training his body with the Zhen clan's art of movement. The energy flowing through his head has only gotten bigger, and if this continues, it won't be 5 years before he loses consciousness. And then a realization came to him. After all, this meant that he had less than 5 years left to live. Panic gripped him. His heart beat faster, and he felt cold sweat on his forehead. He became scared. Then he abruptly opened the door and ran out into the street full of fear. Even though he had mastered the Zheng clan's art of movement, he still couldn't stop his death. But suddenly his attention was drawn and alerted by a strange energy felt in the air. He was curious about what was happening because he could clearly feel the evil energy coming from the building. After that, he quickly set off in the direction where this strange energy was felt, hoping to find its source and understand what it was. But the closer he got, the more he smelled blood. It was very quiet, but it couldn't match the surprise he felt when he saw what unfolded before him next. A formation opened up before him, but he couldn't understand what was happening. Then he stopped abruptly and was shocked by what he saw. In front of him lay the corpses of people from the clan, servants scattered on the ground, and the atmosphere was filled with horror. Their faces were distorted with horror, and their bodies were covered in blood. And I didn't even notice that something like this was happening in the clan, Enshin thought to himself. He began to walk among the corpses, carefully examining each one, trying to find at least one living soul among this terrible spectacle. He tried to understand what had happened here. His mind couldn't accept this sight, and he kept thinking about the formation. He only saw the bodies of people from the Zheng clan, and it flashed through his mind, the attackers were extremely strong. Suddenly, raising his head, he saw a group of people in front of him. "If you were lucky enough to survive, you should have hidden and not come to us," one of them said. They believed that he was destined to have a short life and decided to send him to the other world. But Enshin just stared at them silently, not saying a word. One of them asked not to hold a grudge against him because an order is an order. One of them extended his hand to Enshin, but he just continued to stand silently, after which Enshin abruptly prepared for the attack, taking a fighting stance. Then he grabbed his hand and began to squeeze it tightly. Using his energy, he began to twist it. His hand began to tighten, and he began to scream loudly from the terrible pain. No one present could understand what was happening right now. His hand began to rot rapidly, but he continued to suffer from excruciating pain. Enshin continued to stand silently and watch, not saying a word. The latter were alarmed by what they saw, and did not understand who he was. But Enshin said without fear in his voice that he was the third son of this clan. After Enshin did that to his hand, the man became angry, and rage flared in his eyes. He began to scream loudly, his face contorted with rage, and he prepared for revenge. But before he could take a step, the boy attacked first. The last thing he saw before his death was the figure of Enshin standing before him with an impassive expression. He applied his skills and continued his offensive. The attackers became alert upon seeing this, their faces reflecting mixed emotions of surprise and alarm. He launched an attack on the attackers with all his might, leaving them no chance to counterattack. Enshin neutralized the attackers one by one, acting with impeccable precision. He attacked relentlessly using his incredible strength. The attackers tried to fight back and attack Enshin, but their efforts were in vain. But it was all in vain, as Enshin seemed to take a step forward each time, destroying them one by one. He killed every one of them, leaving no one alive. He killed with wild hatred in his eyes, every blow was filled with anger. He used his power with incredible speed. His opponents fell to the ground one by one, not even having time to resist. After some time, the attackers were already lying on the ground, defeated by Enshin's hands. He sighed with relief, because today was his first time training in the fast sword style, but he already understood the essence of its action. But he had no time to breathe a sigh of relief when a voice praised his sword from the other side. He looked around and saw a crowd of people in front of him, watching his actions. "But that's all. These clumsy people lost because they lost their vigilance," said one of them. However, Enshin could not figure out who these people were and what brought them here. And those people could not believe that he had dedicated his entire life to learning the art of swift swordsmanship. Enshin suggested that these individuals may belong to the Blood Clan sect. However, these people denied this claim, emphasizing that the boys lying on the ground came from this very place. Specifically, they explained that they were part of the Mighty Sword School. Enshin couldn't understand what the Mighty Sword School was doing here together with the Blood Flame sect. "They are considered by the heavens to be the most cruel and strongest in all of Murim. You mean they gathered here because of the heavens?" Enshin thought to himself. After that, he asked them what business they had with his clan, but they sharply replied that it was none of their business. Enshin assumed that they knew about him, because instead of attacking, they stood still and answered his questions. But they just stood there silently looking at him. Hearing no answer, Enshin asked if they knew he had family ties to the desert fortress, the greatest power under heaven. And that's why they don't kill him, because that would be a problem, even though they are from a powerful sword school. Suddenly, a powerful explosion of energy erupted behind them, causing everyone to flinch. From this explosion, the Zhongnan clan sect master landed swiftly on the ground. Blood began to flow from his mouth, and the master snorted, spitting it out onto the ground. After him, the elder was flying rapidly to the ground, approaching the ground at the speed of his fall. Enshin was in complete amazement, not understanding what was happening and where they had come from. Their eyes met, and Enshin instantly realized that it was Elder Ilshin before him. After which she landed sharply on the ground, her movements precise and confident despite the injuries she had sustained. She was injured, her body was breathing heavily, and every movement brought unbearable pain. It seemed that every part of her body was exhausted from severe injuries, but the determination in her eyes did not fade. She is known as the deity of the sword, and right now in this state, the audience was curious who her opponent was. Suddenly, Enshin shuddered, feeling an incredibly strong energy filling the surrounding space. At that moment, Ilshin tensed, her body becoming like a statue, her gaze sharp as a sword blade. A man appeared before them, emanating powerful energy that radiated incredible power and made everything around vibrate from its presence. With each step he took, this energy became more and more tangible, as if it were absorbing the surrounding space. Who is he? Enshin thought to himself. This man stopped abruptly, holding the sword in his hands, and an aura of incredible power flashed around him. He stood silently, not moving, but his presence filled the space with tension, ready to explode at any moment. This ominous energy struck fear into everyone present, as if it pierced them to the very heart. After which his gaze settled on Enshini, and all the focus of his energy was directed towards him. Enshin became alert, feeling an unbearable pain pierce his head from just one glance. Head! One of them fell to his knees before him, expressing respect and humility, after which all the others also fell to their knees, recognizing his rule and welcoming him with complete devotion. And then Enshin realized that he was the head of the School of the Mighty Sword, the man who rules the Mighty Sword School, which is part of the unorthodox 13 Heavens, and is called the Harbinger of Unhappiness in Jianghu. And what then is a master equal to the leader of one of the 9 great sects doing in our clan? But with this situation, it's all over for them, Enshin thought to himself. After that, Enshin, raising his eyes to the cloudless sky, sighed deeply, as if feeling the burden of everything that was happening around him. Therefore, realizing that the situation was becoming increasingly hopeless, he decided in this difficult and unpredictable case to take a risk and try his hand, full of hope that this very step could change everything. Then without hesitation he leapt forward sharply, ready to attack, his movements quick and decisive. He was preparing to attack one of the students at the headmaster's school, his gaze filled with determination and strength. His blade was pointed directly at the enemy, which caused fear in the student, who was watching everything, understanding the full danger of the situation. Then, despite his excitement, he, without a moment's hesitation, swiftly and decisively stabbed him with his knife, feeling how every movement became decisive at this crucial moment. None of those present could understand what was happening. Their looks were filled with deep surprise and incomprehension, because everything looked so unexpected and illogical that even the boldest assumptions could not have predicted such a reaction. They stood as if paralyzed, their eyes wide with surprise, and neither of them could take a step, as if the magic of this moment held them captive, forcing them to forget everything around them. At that moment, Enshin let go of the sword, and the student, weak from shock, fell forward, unable to keep his balance. "Can you kill me after this?" Enshin said confidently. His voice was calm but firm, and his gaze unwavering and stern. The students' company was outraged by his action, and they prepared to attack, their eyes blazing with anger and their hands already gripping their weapons. But the chairman abruptly gave the order to stop. His voice was strict and authoritative, forcing everyone to freeze in place. "Your spirit is much stronger than anyone else in this clan," he said, looking intently at his opponent. Everyone was shocked by what they heard, because praise from the head of the clan was extremely rare. For many it was more than just a compliment. It was a moment that surprised even the oldest students. After which the chairman declared that he would allow Enshin to live, his words sounding not only as an order, but also as an unexpected recognition of power. But Enshin saw it completely differently. For him, it was confirmation that the head had no way of killing him. Then he took his sword, gripping its hilt with unwavering determination, and without hesitation extended it to the clan head. "Because I am the grandson of the former leader of the Divine Sword Squad of the Desert Fortress," Enshin said confidently. These words surprised Ilshin. Her expression changed, and she thought for a moment. After all, this child was the grandson of the former leader of the Desert Fortress's Divine Sword Detachment, the best of the fortress's detachments. A desert fortress created by the imperial family to prevent conspiracies by the walls. Crossing their path is not the best idea. "However, that's not why I'm letting you go alive," the head said. The whole reason was that he liked him, his determination, strength, and independence. And the martial arts masters in Jianghu lack his character and spirit. And if Enshin had nothing to do with the imperial fortress, he would even take him as a student. Everyone was taken aback by what they heard, as they had not expected such a statement. Then he swung his sword, and striking it with force on the ground, created a powerful sound that shattered the silence. But he said he was giving him one day to leave this place. After all, he could not allow other clans to occupy these lands. After that, he turned sharply, and without looking back, left, leaving behind surprised looks and tense silence. But in the end, he declared that if Enshin wanted a duel, he would accept his challenge at absolutely any time, and that he could come and take revenge whenever he wanted. But Enshin just stared at him silently, his gaze cold and unwavering, without any emotion, as if he had already made up his mind. After which the headmaster and the last students walked away, leaving Enshin alone with his thoughts. There was silence all around, and Enshin silently watched them follow, his eyes betraying no feelings. After all, he understood that a long path lay ahead of him, full of trials and difficulties, and only after passing it would he be able to reach the moment when he would face a real challenge. After which he, without hesitation, headed to the estate where his father was dying from terrible wounds. Enshin's heart clenched with pain, because he knew that time was running out and nothing could be changed. "Father, it is I, your son, Eshina," Enshin said, turning to his father. After which the father reached out to his hands, as if seeking to convey a final message. But the father couldn't understand one thing, why his son was so strong. But Enshin explained that this was thanks to the Jung clan's art of movement, which he created and mastered to perfection. But the father couldn't believe what he heard, not understanding whether he had really created something that changed everything around him. Before his eyes, in his memories, appeared the moment when Enshin told him about how he created his martial art, to which his father simply yelled at him, because he believed that Enshin had no right to change the clan's martial art. After which, with a shout, he drove him out, and in anger pointed to the door as if it were a place where there was no room for him. "Is it really the same one?" asked the father. This was the art of movement of their Jung clan, graceful and deadly, like life itself. Every movement was calibrated to the smallest detail, combining incredible speed and precision. This sacred art was created by them, passed down from generation to generation like a precious inheritance. Its essence lay not only in technique, but also in a deep respect for the traditions and spirit of their clan. After that, tears began to flow from the father's eyes from the pain, which was not only physical but also emotional. Every breath of air seemed heavy, and his heart was breaking with bitterness and despair. After realizing that he was ignorant and stupid, his third son created the sacred martial art of the Jung clan. Finally, the father, with a pain in his heart, recognized his son. He recognized that he had the traits of a true clan founder of strength of spirit, determination, and devotion to his beliefs. But Enshin simply listened to his last words in silence, not having the strength or desire to respond, because he understood that these words would not change anything. "You are my son," the father said with tears in his eyes, his voice trembling from his last strength, and closing his eyes he died quietly. He let go of his son's hand, and Enshin was filled with sadness, his heart clenching hard with pain, but he could not change anything. His youngest son began to scream, calling for his father, his voice filled with panic and fear, his words echoing in the void, and it seemed as if the world itself had stopped in that moment. Heart. Enshin placed his father's hand on the floor and carefully checked his pulse, hoping for the best, for some hope, although he understood that it was already too late. But realizing that there was no pulse, he rose and stood over his body, his gaze blank, as if time had stopped. After that, gathering his last strength, he turned to the leader of their clan. His voice was firmer than he had expected, but there was still bitterness and anxiety in it. He asked about Haya's condition, but the manager reassured him that she was fine, just sleeping after her acupuncture point was blocked. This was done in order to hide it, without leaving it to attackers who could use it as a means of manipulation or destruction. "Brother, take care of Hi-Ah in the Zhongnan sect. She has an exceptional connection with the 5 elements, and she will be accepted without any problems," Enshin said. But the younger brother didn't like these words, and with anxiety in his eyes, he asked what Enshin would do next. But Enshin assured him that he would take care of himself. His voice was calm, although inside he felt the weight of loss and responsibility, but he had no other way but to move forward. When suddenly the elder spoke from behind the door, her voice sounded firm and calm. She called him to her yard to talk, feeling that important words should be said outside the hut, in the peace and quiet of the open space. When they left, she asked if he was leaving, and Enshin confidently declared that he was leaving. Now that the head of the mighty sword school has intervened, she now needs to report this to the Zhongnan sect without delay. After which she asked what he was going to do, whether he was going to the desert fortress to his mother's family. Enshin confirmed her words with a look full of understanding. He felt that this was indeed his plan, calculated down to the smallest detail. After all, he had no more places to go, no place to become stronger. He felt that he had exhausted all opportunities for growth, and now there was only one thing left. After his words, the elder suggested that he go with her to Jongnan Mountain, believing that this path would help him find peace and would also be beneficial in his later life and on the path to revenge. Enshin considered it a great honor, but before he could finish, the elder interrupted him, saying that she would recommend him as a disciple to the head of their sect. Those present were shocked and could not believe what they had heard. Their faces reflected complete surprise and uncertainty. The words that had just been spoken seemed so incredible that each of them froze, unable to accept it. "Student of the sect leader?" Enshin asked. But the elder was sure that he would be able to cope with such a task, and that it would be within his power. She saw in him not only strength, but also intelligence, which would allow him to find the right solution even in the most difficult situations. The direct disciple of the head of the Zhongnan sect will be able to learn the most sacred martial arts, which only the chosen ones have access to. And more importantly, the head of the Zhongnan sect is a master who is among the 10 strongest swordsmen in the Celestial Empire. Enshin bowed and apologized, with deep gratitude in his eyes, promising that he would never forget her kindness. His words sounded sincere, and even in the most difficult moments, he understood that such a feeling of gratitude could not be forgotten. But he refused the offer and apologized. "Don't worry, I just wanted to hire someone as talented as you. The head of the School of the Mighty Sword probably thought the same thing," the elder said. Engsing apologized again, but the elder reassured him, saying that the doors of the Zhongnan sect were always open to him, and that he could always return. Enshin asked if he could ask a question, to which the elder replied that he could. As far as he knew, she was one of the oldest, even among the noble family. He wondered if she knew how to get the fruit from the world tree. But the elder was surprised by Enshin's words. Her gaze changed slightly, as if she hadn't expected such a question. "The fruits from the world tree are under the protection of the head of the desert fortress, whom the emperor has recognized as his equal. They say that they give the eater eternal life and youth. It is a heavenly treasure. If I eat this fruit, won't I be able to live a little longer than I'm supposed to?" Enshin thought to himself. The elder knew nothing more, because she had not lived even half of her allotted lifespan, and therefore had no power over the tree. She only knew that the head of the desert fortress could give fruits to other people. Then Enshin was sent to go to the desert fortress, but the elder assured him that they would not be so easy to obtain, because these things were sacred to the noble family. But he had no other choice, because he knew of no other way. All he could do was become the leader of the Divine Sword Squad and achieve great achievements. But in that case, the elder could only cheer for him, because she understood that the path Enshin was taking would be difficult and full of dangers. After which she resigned, but now she needed to give her all to her sect. She ordered the swordsman Rock and the Fist of the Neutral Spirit to help clean up everything that was left after the events. After which she bowed and walked away. Enshin watched her trail, thanked her for her wisdom and support, and then said goodbye to her with a gesture that expressed deep respect. After some time, all the bodies were buried and the area was thoroughly cleaned. Enshin thanked everyone again for their help. His words were sincere and grateful. But they said that there was no need to thank them, replying that it was their duty and honor to help. And they also felt guilty for what happened, because each of them understood that they could have prevented it. The younger brother called Enshin. His voice was a little shaky, but there was determination in it. He stood there, choosing his words, hesitating how best to express his feelings. After all, an apology will not drown out the memories of what he experienced in the clan. But when they meet again, he will try to be his older brother, and he hopes that he will stay alive. Enshin believed that there was nothing unusual in learning the martial arts of the Zhongnan sect at a more mature age, so he told him to train because his life depended on it. After that, he turned his attention to the frightened Hai-Ah, who was standing a little to the side, her eyes full of anxiety and incomprehensible emotions. But he said that his older brother should protect her, because she was vulnerable and needed support during this difficult time. After that, he turned to the manager and asked where he was going. "There are several branches of the Zheng clan in Nanyang. Since we still have clan members left, we should support them with the remaining family resources," he said. Enshin said that they all knew that he was going to the desert fortress, and that although it was rare, he hoped that they would be able to see each other. The manager is skilled in martial arts, so Enshin was confident that he would be able to take care of himself. After which he wished me a safe journey and asked me to take care of myself. At these words, the manager's eyes widened and his mouth dropped open in surprise. After that, Enshin set off on his long and difficult journey, leaving behind everything familiar and dear, ready for all the trials that await him in the desert fortress. Did he wish me a safe journey? The manager asked himself in his mind. After all, he couldn't remember a single person from the descendants of the Zheng clan after being accepted by the previous patriarch. After some time, Enshin reached the city of Xiangyang. The city was impressive in its grandeur and chaos, narrow streets, bright markets, the bustle of people, and the smells of various dishes mixing in the air. He went into one of the buildings where people were resting. They were sitting at tables, talking and laughing among themselves. Enshin took his table. He carefully placed his things on the table, a small bag that always remained nearby. After that, he turned his thoughtful gaze towards the city. Finally, I have arrived, Enshin thought to himself. After that, he turned his attention to the conversation of the visitors, who were lively discussing how the desert fortress was truly impressive in its incredibleness. Because of it, people full of big dreams flock here from all over the central plain. The local owner has grabbed luck by the tail. He says that due to the influx of people, he always has no alcohol left to sell. And lately, in the taverns, day and night can't be distinguished. Martial arts masters have arrived for the entrance exam, simply drowning in a barrel of liquor. Hearing the mention of the exam in the desert fortress, he was filled with curiosity as to where exactly this place was located. Suddenly, a young guy approached his table, as if hesitating, but at the same time with a clear intention to say something. The guy just stood there and stared at him silently. But later, he hesitantly apologized for not saying hello right away, explaining that he simply didn't expect to see a candidate who turned out to be younger than himself. "I am Hongwon Chan from the far-off province of Shanxi," the boy said with a smile. After that, Enshin politely introduced himself, giving his name. Hongwon, without thinking twice, sat down at his table and started a conversation about the path Enshin had taken. Then he began to tell me about how he had to fight with the bandits of the Green Forest and the pirates, and they were terrible. After that, Enshin thoughtfully began to recall his difficult path and the attackers who stood in his way, how he spent the night in the open air, overcoming all the difficulties of the journey to finally reach this place. Suddenly, Hongwon began to look around sharply. After he made sure that no one was around, Hongwon suggested that they become friends and share information about the ordeal. Enshin calmly asked what kind of trials he was talking about, because he wasn't entirely sure what Hongwon meant by those words. Hongwon was surprised by what he heard, his eyes widening slightly. "Haven't you heard anything about the trials in the desert fortress?" he asked. The desert fortress is different from ordinary Jianghu sects. To hold a position in both the military and civilian sectors, it is necessary to pass separate tests for entry into the desert fortress. That's why so many people gather here. It doesn't matter if you know the basics or not. Once you join them, you'll have a lot of opportunities, and they'll teach you everything, so it's no wonder there are so many martial arts masters here. Many masters have studied various martial arts just to pass this test. The Desert Fortress is the strongest organization that possesses martial arts, and a place that inevitably makes the heart beat faster. After the imperial family ruling the Central Plains decided to control martial arts schools, elixirs, and advanced martial arts from all over the world. Many people say that large sects with traditions are better, but they don't know what they are talking about. How could a martial arts school created by commoners be stronger than a desert fortress if they had already created their empire and become emperors? Almost no one manages to pass the desert fortress test on their first try. Perhaps only 1 in 1,000 succeeds, but usually it is the heirs of the heads of respected martial arts clans who rise to prominence. And this gave him an idea, and he suggested that Enshin go to the test with him tomorrow. Enshin agreed without even thinking, immediately feeling that Hongwon's proposal could be beneficial for both of them. Hongwon looked at him silently, unable to hide his surprise, as he couldn't understand how Enshin had agreed so quickly. But at the same time, he was glad that he had agreed after all. Hongwon assumed that he would be confused the first time, but in that case, Enshin could just repeat after him. At the same time, Enshin was glad that there was a chance to get into the desert fortress after passing the test. He would not want to ask his mother's family for help. The next day the test began. All applicants were sent to the testing site. Each of them had their own goal and was ready to meet the new challenges that awaited them ahead. The atmosphere was filled with tension and anticipation, as no one could be sure what awaited them. And finally they reached a deserted fortress, majestic and mysterious, standing on the horizon. They were given numbers by which they were to undergo the tests. Enshin looked at the sign and got number 13. After that, Enshin turned his attention to the other contestants, carefully examining them. Each of them looked different. Some were focused, some were nervous, but all of them, without exception, had determination and a willingness to fight in their eyes. And finally the judge came out to them, tall and serious, with a look that left no room for doubt. This marked the beginning of the first test. Contestants would pass if the judge accepted their board, but if told to return to the registration desk, they would fail. And the second test was the fights. "And what will the third test be?" Enshin asked. But Hongwon abruptly stopped talking and began scratching his nose, as if trying to calm himself down or collect his thoughts. Then he replied that the third test was an interview with the head of the desert fortress. Enshin wondered if they really had to go straight ahead, to which Hongwon calmly replied that they did. Many come to Senyan just for this opportunity. Talking to a great master like the leader of the desert fortress is an incredible chance. They hope to gain enlightenment or advice. Enshin gripped his tablet tighter, feeling the tension in the air grow. Suddenly, the judge announced the beginning of the first test, which was to test their skill in the art of rapid swordplay. They needed to demonstrate a swing of their fastest sword technique. While the judge will observe and evaluate, "Let me go out first," Hongwon exclaimed. The judge waved in agreement, his gaze showing no emotion, but it was clear that he was carefully watching every movement of the participants. At that time, Enshin was lost in thought. He only had to show his fastest sword technique. In his opinion, it sounded simple. After that, he turned his attention to Hongwon, carefully watching his steps. He believed that he had a good, refined spirit and that he was strong. Stronger than those bandits he met on the way here. At that time, Hongwon sighed and abruptly took out his sword, his movements confident and quick. After that, Hongwon hit the air with all his strength with his technique, and the sword sparkled. The air around him trembled from the energy of his punch, and even the referee couldn't help but notice the power and precision of this move. Everyone present was surprised by what they saw, and believed that his level was truly high. Some didn't even see the sword, while others only noticed the afterimage. But Hongwon was not to be commended. He stood focused, waiting for the judge's verdict. The judge told him to give him his plate. Hearing this, Hongwon couldn't hide his joy, his face lit up, and he quickly handed the plate to the judge. After which, Hongwon thanked the judge with a slight smile and turned to Enshin, wishing him luck. Enshin was serious. His gaze was firm. After that, Enshin confidently headed to the platform, his every step full of determination. No one believed until the last minute that the guy had come to take the exam. Everyone looked at Enshin in surprise, because his young age and calm confidence raised doubts about whether he would be able to cope with what awaited him. And if he is from another province, where else can he show his sword techniques to the martial arts masters of the desert fortress? Even getting advice will be useful. After which Enshin stopped abruptly in front of the judge. He was preparing to show his strength, focusing all his energy in one moment. The referee, after a short pause, allowed the fight to begin, and Enshin, without hesitation, began to release his energy. After which Enshin abruptly pulled his sword from its scabbard, his movement quick and precise. After which Enshin released all his energy, and the sword in his hands moved as if alive. Everyone's eyes widened at what they saw, and goosebumps ran down their skin as they realized Enshin's full power and skill. Then the sword stopped abruptly in front of the judge's face. The technique was so impressive that even experienced contestants couldn't help but feel the power. The judge, although he remained calm, could not help but appreciate the level of this Enshin. "Before you is the future of the desert fortress," the judge said. Everyone was shocked by what they heard. Their mouths dropped open in surprise. After that, the judge, remaining calm, asked Enshin to hand him the board. His gaze remained unchanged, but a certain interest appeared in his eyes, because what he had just seen clearly exceeded his expectations. Then the judge calmly said that Enshin could leave, and without showing any emotion, returned to his notes, while Enshin thanked him for the opportunity with a slight nod. After that, the next participant was called, and Enshin took his cloak, throwing it over his shoulders, and calmly walked on. Everyone looked after him, unable to take their eyes off Enshin, calmly and confidently, leaving the testing site, and Hongwon ran after him. "Are you by any chance a child of a famous clan?" he asked. But Enshin didn't understand what this changed, because he had heard that after joining the desert fortress, all that mattered was one's martial arts, skills, and efforts. Hongwon was surprised that he decided to go through all the trials of the desert fortress in all seriousness. Enshin believed that not only was he here for this, but Hongwon and the other contestants also had their own goals. But Hongwon abruptly fell silent and didn't answer. But I agreed with Enshin's words. After that, I thanked him for everything and said goodbye because he had to go. After which Hongwon quickly ran away, as if trying to avoid any further questions or conversations. Enshin watched him, and although he didn't say it out loud, he hoped that Hongwon would be able to pass the second exam. The next day, Enshin continued his training, focused on improving his skills. The second test is a duel, where you have to fight other contenders, relying on your martial arts. And he only had 3 weeks to start. Before future fights, he should focus on improving the skills he has already mastered. The art of movement of the Jung clan, the art of the swift sword, and also the energy management technique, which I called source writing. 3 weeks passed, and finally the day of the second test arrived. The atmosphere was tense. Every participant felt their heart beat faster. They reached the place where the test was to take place, and the escort asked them to wait outside, after which he went inside himself. Everyone present began to lose confidence from the tension. Each of them felt how their souls became heavier, and doubts began to creep into their hearts. Among them was a contestant in white clothes, and only entry-level masters wear such clothes. The energy from him was incredibly strong, even in white clothes, indicating that he had a promising future. Enshin's tension grew inside. His heart beat faster, but his mind remained focused. But suddenly all his thoughts were scattered, as a familiar voice called out to him. Enshin turned around and saw Hongwon, who said with a smile that he had grown up. In response, Enshin also smiled and said that you look better. I somehow succeeded, Hongwon said proudly, his eyes shining with confidence. Then he asked me to remember that winning this test is not the most important thing in this exam. Even if he wins one of the 2 battles, it will be enough to attract the attention of the masters from the desert fortress. And that was a big problem because they now have higher standards. He heard that White Qilin was participating in today's test. These words alarmed Enshin. White Qilin from the Namgun clan, he asked, and Hongwon confirmed his words. He dealt with a notorious gang of bandits before he was 15. He beheaded the swordmaster of an unorthodox sect, a hidden assassin. It was rumored that he defeated all the rising fighters in the Dragon and Phoenix tournament of the 8 great clans when he was only 18. Enshin didn't understand if he was a young master from the Namgun clan. Why was he so eager to join the desert fortress? He already possessed immense power, had a famous clan, and his position was actually very strong. Because he is the son of a concubine, the clan head's city is already occupied, Hongwon replied. But if you rise to the position of head of a desert fortress, even the patriarchs of the 8 great clans will be envious. After all, Ensha's influence will be even greater than theirs. A desert fortress, maintaining order in Jianghu from the heart of the Central Plains. Suddenly Enshin was called for a test. The realization that it was his turn gave him determination. He refocused, preparing for the next stage, where he had to demonstrate everything he was capable of. I hope to see you again at the next stage in the desert fortress, Enshin said. Hongwon was surprised by Enshin's words. After which, Hongwon shouted after him that they would definitely meet. His voice was full of confidence and determination, as if he was already sure that their paths would cross again. At that time, anxiety reigned on the site. A slight excitement was noticeable even among experienced contenders, because no one could predict what lay ahead. Enshin stood on the platform opposite his opponent, feeling every muscle in his body tense, ready for battle. The referee announced the start of the fight, his voice breaking the tension hanging in the air. Enshin's opponent began to giggle loudly in front of him, which surprised Enshin himself. Not knowing your ultimate goal is just despair, it must be. You're just a butterfly fluttering everywhere, he said. But before he could finish, Enshin hit him in the face. The speed and accuracy of the blow amazed even his opponent, who had not expected such an instant reaction. The blow was so strong that the enemy flew several meters away. The opponent lost his balance and was unable to hold his body, and he hit his head on the ground. Enshin's gaze was serious. There was no joy or satisfaction from victory on his face. At that time, the enemy's body was being taken from the battlefield, and all eyes were fixed on this moment. The atmosphere became even more tense when the referee announced that the victory was for Enshin, and Enshin himself stood still, not making a single movement. One of the contestants present smiled, and without delay went out onto the stage to Enshin. "Can I try?" he asked. He stood confidently, with an expression on his face that indicated readiness for battle. His posture could be compared to that of an experienced warrior who had already participated in such trials more than once. This alarmed Enshin. He looked closely at his opponent, feeling that this contender had some special strength or experience that could make this fight much more difficult. They stood facing each other, and the atmosphere on the court became even more tense. Everyone froze in anticipation, unable to take their eyes off the stage. Every participant, every observer felt the tension growing, and time seemed to stand still. Everyone was curious about who would win, but everyone felt deep down that this opponent that Enshin was now looking at seemed stronger than all the others. They expected no less from Namgun. The Namgun clan was renowned for its strength and skill, and each of its members was, without a doubt, a formidable opponent. When Enshin heard that his opponent was from the Namgun clan, his eyes instantly widened in surprise. He couldn't believe his ears, such a strong opponent, and with such a large clan behind him. Everyone was curious whether they would be able to witness the Endless Heavens technique today, one of the most famous and terrifying attacks that existed among the warriors of the Namgun clan. It seems like this guy is 5 years older than me. It doesn't look like he's at a level that's beyond my grasp, Enshin thought to himself. Thanks to his family's fighting techniques, he is in better physical shape than him, but he is inferior to him in other aspects. Hua Xin bowed, showing immense respect for his opponent, as well as for the challenge itself. After that, he introduced himself and warned that he mainly trained the Boundless Heavens technique and infinite steps. "Nice to meet you," he said, drawing his sword from its scabbard. "I studied the art of movement of the Zhong clan," Enshin said. Hua Xin looked at him questioningly, as if waiting for Enshin to make the first move or show his intentions. But he was still curious about why Enshin didn't get his sword out. Hua Xin watched closely, and this question haunted him. After that, Enshin slowly reached for the scabbard, and his movements were so clear and deliberate that even Hua Xin, who was an experienced fighter, couldn't help but feel the tension in the air. Hua Xin smiled silently, realizing that Enshin seemed to be not such an easy opponent. He drew his sword, and a huge force of energy immediately came out of it, filling the air around him. Enshin prepared to attack, his eyes becoming even more focused, and his body tense to the limit. The main essence of the technique I've been practicing lately is unpredictability, an unexpected main attack in an unpredictable rhythm. And if he succeeds, he will be able to force Hua Xin to relax his vigilance, because this could be the key moment in the fight. He prepared for the attack, focusing all his energy and strength on one moment. Everyone was preparing for this fight, full of anticipation. The tension in the air was almost palpable. Everyone present held their breath as they watched the two rivals in the arena. The referee raised his hand, and his voice, calm but confident, rang clearly over the arena, announcing the start of the fight. Everyone present held their breath, waiting for this moment to become the starting point for a great fight. But after one instant blow that cut through the air with lightning speed, a piece of Enshin's sword flew off. But Enshin didn't notice this. Despite the broken sword, he continued to attack, his movements becoming even faster, and his blows more accurate. A piece of the sword fell to the ground with a dull clang that echoed throughout the arena. Everyone suddenly froze like statues, unable to believe their eyes, the sound of the sword fragment falling still echoing in their heads, and everyone realized that the situation had taken an unexpected turn. But even Enshin himself did not expect such a turn of events. He stopped for a moment, looking at the fragment of the sword lying on the ground. Everyone present began to whisper among themselves, because no one had predicted such a turn of events, and discussed Namgun Hua's victory. But some seemed to be speechless, their mouths hanging open and their eyes wide open. Namgun Hua slowly looked up and thoughtfully examined his sword, which was quietly gleaming. After which he silently lowered the sword down, as if giving it a rest before the upcoming test. "I lost," he said abruptly and unexpectedly. Enshin couldn't understand what was happening. His mind was full of questions, and each new turn of events seemed even more confusing. But not only was he shocked by what he heard, but everyone present was also shocked. All eyes turned to Namgun Hua, their faces reflecting surprise and anxiety. Others thought that Enshin was such a frightening and wonderful sword, and they thought that he was at least 5 years younger than Hua. They wondered if he could use true energy in his techniques. A powerful martial arts master was hiding in Henan, and it was even scary to imagine what he would become in the future. After which the judge asked what his name was, then observed the situation for a few seconds, and then, without saying a word, pointed his finger in the other direction. "If you go north, you will see a garden. Wait there," said the judge. He thanked me for the fight and said that he would be happy to fight again. His voice was calm, but there was a certain determination in it. Hua wanted to say the same thing, but also thanked him for the fight, and would look forward to their next meeting. Enshin's gaze was firm, and he could not hide his readiness. After that, Enshin, remaining calm, headed towards the place indicated by the judge. His steps were confident, although a wave of emotion still reigned in his soul, which he tried to hide. Other contestants who had passed the second test were already sitting in that place. No one expected to see such a young person pass the second test. They thought Namgung Huaxin would come out first. Enshin knew that he would have no chance of winning because the opponent was much stronger and more experienced. Enshin knew that he would have no chance of winning if the fight dragged on, which is why, as soon as the duel began, I used the most extreme form of the magnificent sword I knew. However, because Namgung Huaxin filled his sword with his true energy, it broke. It was a failure on his part due to the careless use of a magnificent sword, but instead he admitted his defeat. He thought it was the nobility of a famous family. The Chung clan is a third-rate branch clan in Xinyi County. If there was someone at home who knew how to use such a skill, there's no way I would teach it to him. He looked at his sword with a smile. He knows it now. It dawned on him how to do things better only when he saw his mistake. Now I realize that it's not as simple as putting your energy into a sword. He can use true energy as a means to become one with the sword. A glow suddenly enveloped the sword and Enshin himself, as if an invisible force had awakened in every crumb of metal. The contestants sitting nearby fell silent, their gazes catching this unusual phenomenon. Enshin resonated with the sword, and it seemed as if an invisible but powerful bond was forming between them. But everyone thought it was impossible because Enshin was too young for that. The energy emanating from the sword began to surround everything around it, consuming every corner of space. It spread through the air like an invisible force, intertwined with Enshin's every movement. The feeling was incredible, as if the sword and his body had merged together, becoming a single whole, moving without thinking, only under the influence of instincts. After that, he stood, looking at the sword and smiling, his gaze full of inner satisfaction and peace, as if he had found what he was looking for. Suddenly, Huaxin approached him, and looking into his eyes congratulated him on his enlightenment. His gaze was full of respect and understanding. But Enshin drew attention to his hands. They were on their swords, as if they were preparing to attack at absolutely any moment. He was protecting me, out of fear that someone might stand in the way of my enlightenment, Enshin thought to himself. After which he thanked him for protecting him. Ta congratulated Huaxin on passing the Desert Fortress test. But Huaxin was surprised by his words. He didn't expect Enshin to express gratitude for what he was doing, because for him it was self-evident. After that, Huaxin, unable to restrain himself, began to laugh loudly. It was unexpected and completely out of his style, but the laughter cut through the silence around him, full of warmth and lightness. "I'm actually here too," Chon said, raising his hand. After which they, together with Enshin, congratulated each other on passing the second test. Hongwan asked if Enshin knew what nickname he had been given. When someone demonstrated exceptional fighting prowess or attracted attention, people would give them a nickname and then address them that way. Most nicknames represent great honor for martial artists, except for those who commit soul-chilling acts. Huaxin had heard about it too, but Yunshin didn't understand why he was given the nickname, since he had only passed the test. Lightning Genius, that's what Enshin Huaxin called him. Enshin possessed an incredibly powerful lightning technique, a light skill that was impressive in its speed and power. Even the martial arts masters of the Desert Fortress call him that, which only emphasizes the exclusivity of his technique and skill. So it turns out that his nickname became known even in Jianghu, gaining popularity among craftsmen and warriors. Enshin didn't understand why they decided this wasn't just a joke on someone who only had a little sword skill. "If it's a little bit for you, then I'm a complete zero, you know?" Huaxin said mockingly. Lightning Genius Zhong Yunshin, a name he would never have dreamed of when he trained in Zhong's Revenge. Evening came, and all the contestants gathered near the building where the final test was to take place. This was the final test. If they passed it, they would join the Desert Fortress. The atmosphere was tense, as everyone understood that this stage would be decisive. A living part of history and one of the strongest martial artists meeting the head of a desert fortress. The first contestant, full of confidence, boldly set out for the challenge, his posture firm and his gaze radiating determination, as if he already knew that victory awaited him. But after a while he left the building looking like a squeezed lemon. His face was pale and his steps weak, clearly showing that the ordeal had turned out to be much more difficult than he had expected. He was shocked when he saw what had happened. His eyes were wide open, and his expression reflected complete incomprehension and confusion. Everyone was leaving pretty quickly, and the question arose whether the chairman was just observing without saying anything. After that it was Enshin's turn. He was called for testing. Enshin went to the test with full confidence and seriousness. He was told to climb to the very top, His steps were firm and his gaze focused. Enshin reached the door that would determine his future fate. The door opened in front of him, and he stepped inside, ready for what awaited him beyond the threshold. Enshin looked around. The room was filled with dense plants that wrapped around the walls and created an atmosphere of mystery. They were placed in huge pots, some of them reaching to the ceiling, while others looked as if they were from another world. After which he stopped abruptly at what he saw. His heart began to beat harder, as if the internal tension had reached its limit. In front of him lay a woman on the sofa, her figure calm, but at the same time so mysterious that it was difficult to understand what exactly was happening. But I immediately realized that this woman, the head of the desert fortress, was considered almost the strongest in the entire world. Enshin greeted and introduced himself, waiting for a reaction, when suddenly the clan head began to turn, slowly looking up at him. But with every movement, Enshin became more and more tense. After she returned, the clan head struck Enshin with her incredible beauty. Her face was perfect, and her green eyes radiated a mysterious depth in which one could get lost. "You are related by blood to this child," she said. Enshin didn't understand what she was talking about, but his thoughts were occupied with another thought. Did she really know his mother? But she silently looked at him, her gaze so penetrating that it seemed his every movement could not escape her attention. After which she praised him, because she realized that he was not one of the timid dozen. Enshin said that he was the grandson of the former Divine Sword Squad, and he would soon become part of the Elders. This man was not one to just give up. But she simply silently looked at him, as if trying to unravel his inner world, her gaze calm but penetrating. Then she noticed that he was injured, and her gaze instantly changed. But Enshin assured her that there was no need to worry, because it was nothing serious at all. "I don't think so. It's just all hidden by your trained body," she said. She began to assume that he had lived for about 15 years. But I agreed that it's not worth it for an outsider to get involved in this, but it's still necessary to resolve this issue. But Enshin apologized, bowing his head in respect. The unusual appearance she exudes as someone with absolute power is the topic of conversation, not his family problems. After which she began to rise, her movements smooth and confident, as if every gesture testified to her strength and authority. She liked Enshin, but she found it funny that he didn't bow his head in submission, even though he hadn't come here just for that reason. Enshin was surprised when she found out that he had come for something specific. Surprise could be read in his eyes, because he did not expect her to immediately understand his intentions. "Can someone like me survive if I eat the fruit of the world tree?" Enshin asked. But unfortunately it did not contain any absolute information about this. She was absolutely confident that he would be able to achieve anything he set his mind to, because his determination and perseverance knew no bounds. Enshin asked if he would really be able to obtain the fruit, as doubts about his abilities gradually began to arise. But the chairman replied that the outcome would depend solely on his own actions and decisions, because only his efforts would determine the final outcome. This information was enough for Enshin, so he thanked him and bowed low, thereby showing his respect. But suddenly he had a revelation, and he realized that everything he wanted lay in his own hands. "Am I now the martial arts master of the desert fortress?" he asked. She smiled, confirming his words, and in a quiet but confident voice said that he could go. She believed that he would be the next commander of the Divine Sword Squad. Their gazes met, and in her eyes there was both support and expectation. After that, Enshin left the room, deeply thinking about her words, which had left an echo in him and forced him to reconsider his own beliefs and plans. He didn't even understand if she was joking with him or if she still saw some potential in him. Then he stopped abruptly, feeling like something important had gone unnoticed, and turned back. He couldn't understand what she meant. Her words remained in his head like a riddle. And then the thought flashed through his mind that she was hinting that if he became the commander of the detachment, he would be able to obtain the fruits of the tree. The next day, the remaining contestants went to their first training session. Only 4 successful contestants remained, and tension was already felt among them, as each of them sought to prove their superiority in the fight for victory. "Do you know what the main task of the desert fortress is?" the guide asked. Hongwon suggested that this was an exposure of the martial arts master's insidious plans. The guide confirmed these guesses, but added that the task is much more complicated because there is a certain order of actions that must be followed. It also includes preventing or suppressing conflicts in the world of martial arts. No one could even imagine what the battle in the world of martial arts would turn out like. These days, as the land is filled with rumors about the discovery of the new location of the heavenly demon's tomb, the Central Plains may once again be flooded with blood. If those who seek secret techniques and unsurpassed combat elixirs only fought among themselves, it would be nothing. However, the cruelty of greedy martial artists affects not only other masters, but also ordinary people. To find these hellish things happening again is like going back to the pre-Emer period, 17 years after that terrible moment. The problem is not only with Samwoido, the old factions and the 8 major sects are also adding to the trouble. If this is ignored, ordinary people will suffer, and if the people are dissatisfied, it will make it difficult to collect taxes and create problems for the government. That's why the imperial family spends a huge amount of resources on maintaining this place. The guide began to explain what their main task was in the desert fortress. Their main task was to eliminate martial arts masters, exactly those that repeat the usual pace of people's lives. It means beheading enemies who prevent people from living peacefully. After that, the guide pointed to the building in which they would live, and as soon as they settled in, they were assigned to a building corresponding to their group and given basic necessities, after which they were wished good luck, and the students began to move into their rooms. The evening after settling in, Enshin sat in his room, training his energy with concentration, his breathing even, and his eyes closed as he channeled inner strength through his body. A week has already passed. The distribution is taking longer than expected, Enshin thought to himself. But suddenly Hongwon knocked on his room door. When the door opened, there was a slight tension on Hongwon's face, as if he had hesitated for a long time before coming. Enshin calmly asked why Hongwon had come. Hongwon explained that he had heard rumors that the division had been completed, and he and Enshin ended up in the same Magwang group. Enshin listened attentively to Hongwon's words without interrupting, his gaze becoming more serious, and his thoughts deepening into thoughts about Magwang's group. Hongwon asked if Enshin had heard any rumors about Magwang, but Enshin only looked at him in surprise, not understanding what he was talking about. The leaders of 17 fighting groups under the leadership of Shin Gomdan participated in martial arts competitions that select new martial arts masters. Are you saying that the leaders of the groups are obliged to compete with each other? Enshin asked. Many just wanted to find a nickname like White Qilin or Lightning Genius. They discussed it all night, delving into details and assumptions. The next day, the Magwang meeting was held. Enshin carefully watched the other participants, trying to understand who he would have to work with. All members of the group gathered in a spacious hall, the atmosphere of which was full of tension and anticipation. The leader of Magwang, Ma Jin, whose figure exuded authority and strength. They heard that he claimed the title of the strongest among the 17 leaders of the desert fortress, and there were strong arguments for that. You, a lightning genius? The leader asked. Enshin confirmed his words, nodding his head, demonstrating his readiness and determination. His gaze was focused, and the leader could sense his determination, which he liked. He saw his spirit and believed that people like Enshin did not give up so easily. The fighting force led by Shin Gomdan in the desert fortress is somewhat similar to the sect in the Central Plains. Here they will learn martial arts and carry out missions. Mr. Ma, I have a question for you, Hongwon asked nervously. Mr. Ma agreed to let him ask his question, and Hongwon, who could feel a slight tension in the air, thanked him for the opportunity to ask the question. He said they would be learning martial arts in a desert fortress. He wondered if that meant they would all be learning the same martial arts. But Ma Jin assured that this was not the case, because each of them would learn their own unique style. But clearly, their knowledge remained limited only to Magwanik's techniques, as if they could not go beyond what had been learned. Stubborn training became not just a necessity, but a real life challenge, because it was the key to survival. I've also heard about this technique, Enshin thought to himself. Magwanik is a well-known grouping among the 17 forces under Shin Gomdan. Their reputation is based on the exceptional skill and strategy they possess, as well as their ability to act coherently and effectively even in the most difficult situations. They once faced 24 elite masters of the Hwasun sect in battle and did not lose a single fighter. This incident only strengthened the faith of those who believe that the desert fortress has no equal in the world. The desert fortress belongs to the Huangli sect. Here, attacking a martial arts master of the sect is not considered treason, so they can challenge the strongest to learn and improve. Why wouldn't this be considered treason? Enshin asked. There are too many unconventional fighters in the martial arts world. Some practiced demonic arts until they lost their memory, and some simply mastered the mind with incomprehensible arts that allow them to slip past the strongest masters and escape into hidden valleys. Simply put, even if they practice for a long time in the desert fortress, it doesn't give them any advantages in the eyes of the imperial family. "Do everything you can to become stronger, or death," said a voice behind them. However, once they go on a mission and return with a wound from Namgun Chilgom's sword, they will immediately understand what he's talking about. "Javan Gamahang, this is really scary," a voice said. It was the voice of a boy sitting on the floor behind them. His voice sounded confident, without the slightest doubt, and there was a sense of power and authority in it. "Jawan Gemahang is a world-famous transcendental technique. Only the legitimate heir of the Namgun family is capable of this technique. If we talk about Namgun Chilgom, isn't he considered one of the strongest masters among them?" Enshin couldn't believe that this guy had encountered this technique and still managed to survive. "Shall we start with the lightning genius?" the boy said. Rumors had reached him that his swift sword was unparalleled, so he wanted to see for himself. Enshin tensed, feeling the tension in the air growing with every second. After that, he walked to the middle of the hall, his steps confident. Enshin drew his sword, stood in a fighting stance, and began to release his energy. Everyone was amazed and surprised by what they saw, because a picture opened before them that exceeded all their expectations. Enshin's technique was impressive in its power and grace. His every movement was completely under control, and the energy radiating from him seemed almost invincible. The boy smiled and also began to draw his sword from its scabbard. They stood facing each other, and the entire space between them was filled with tension. "I am Chong Myung, born and raised here in Yangnan," the boy said. Enshin also greeted and introduced himself, his voice sounding calm, but with a certain determination. Cheong Myung thought this was a backwater city, but I also didn't deny the fact that if he was able to end up here, it means that Enshin is quite talented, after which he asked to show everything he was capable of. To unleash the potential of his sword, to show all his inner energy. Enshin agreed and began to draw his sword from its scabbard. Everyone around was shocked by what they saw and could not hide their delight. There was silence in the hall, interrupted only by deep breaths and quiet whispers among those present. Enshin's technique and determination amazed even those accustomed to great strength and skill. Chong Myung was also amazed by his strength. He stood and carefully watched Enshin's every move, not hiding his surprise. At that time, Enshin himself, despite the admiring looks and tension, tried to concentrate. His mind was focused only on the battle, on every move, on every detail. He breathed deeply, trying to read the energy of his opponent's breath. His energy was concentrated in every movement, and every particle of his being was tuned to achieve maximum efficiency. "Now!" he thought to himself, so sharply attacking the enemy. Enshin struck him with all his strength with his swift sword technique. The sword quickly flew into the air, and the blow was incredibly powerful, like lightning. But Chong Myung easily parried his attack, his movements calm and precise, and despite the power and speed of Enshin's strike, he simply deflected the sword with almost no effort. And in the next moment, Chong Myung hit Enshin. The blow was so strong and precise that Enshin barely had time to react. Yes, he was able to stay on his feet, but still he didn't understand when he managed to take the sword. After Cheon Myung's punch knocked him back, Enshin tried to concentrate his energy in his legs. He survived against the sword of Namgun Chil, a true master. "I think it's easier than it seems," Enshin thought to himself. After Enshin concentrated the energy in his legs, he quickly began to attack Cheonmeng, his movements becoming unpredictable and incredibly fast. Enshin decided to take a chance and attack directly, not trying to bypass Chongmeng's defenses, but going at him with maximum force and determination. Enshin, unexpectedly for everyone, made a sharp jump and ended up behind Chongmeng. Once behind Chongmeng, Enshin instantly attacked him from behind. The blow was quick and powerful, aimed at taking advantage of his opponent's moment of confusion. But Chong Myung managed to react and block the shot. After the swords clashed and the blow was blocked, their eyes met, and at that moment an invisible tension arose between them that spoke louder than any words. After that, Chong Myung suddenly disappeared from Enshin's sight, his movement so fast and unpredictable that Enshin couldn't immediately understand where he had gone. Enshin quickly focused, shutting out all unnecessary thoughts and concentrating his energy on his feelings. He understood that Chong Myung was somewhere nearby, and his absence from sight was just a tactical maneuver. Suddenly, Chong Myung appeared behind Enshin, silent and swift as a shadow, his movements so smooth and precise that even experienced warriors would not have noticed him. Enshin sensed Chongmeng's approach at the last moment. His instincts worked flawlessly. He instantly swerved to the side, avoiding the attack. Seizing the moment after the dodge, Enshin instantly gathered all his energy and launched a powerful counterattack, his sword moving quickly and accurately towards Chongmeng. But suddenly, Chongmyung demonstrated his incredible agility, and in an instant he jumped high into the air, finding himself right above Enshin. After a maneuver in the air, he jumped forward sharply, approaching him. After their swords met in a series of rapid attacks, Enshin and Chongmyung found themselves facing each other, regaining distance. Everyone around opened their mouths in amazement as they watched this incredible fight. The fight between Enshin and Chongmyung was so intense and fast that the spectators could not look away. Enshin was covered in sweat, his body burning with tension, but his gaze was cold and focused. As expected, he's from a noble family, he thought to himself. Enshin gripped his sword tightly, feeling his hand absorb every vibration, every pulse of energy emanating from the weapon. At that moment, he decided to take a risk and try to create resonance with the sword. This movement required maximum concentration and strength of mind. In a moment of deep concentration, when Enshin finally gathered all his energy to use resonance with his sword, his gaze involuntarily stopped at those present. Enshin was momentarily confused when he noticed everyone present staring at him with their mouths open, stunned and amazed. "Do you have something to tell me?" he asked. Chongmyung was in shock. He stood in front of Enshin. He couldn't believe his eyes and feelings. Enshin knew that he had allowed him to make a few attacks and asked him to be honest with him. Chongmyung, completely unexpectedly, asked how old Enshin was. Enshin, feeling Cheonmyung's gaze on him, couldn't understand why he had suddenly asked about his age and how it could be important in their duel. He believed that enemies usually didn't care about age, only real achievements mattered. Chongmyung was shocked. He couldn't believe his ears. Chongmyung couldn't believe that he was facing a fighter with such a level of skill at only 15 years old. It was absolutely incredible. Usually true masters reach such heights after many years of hard training and fighting, and here a young guy already possesses such strength and control over his energy. Chongmyung had been to the Dragon and Phoenix tournament, but had never seen anything like it. Even if someone had studied the path of perception since birth, to reach such heights was just something. Everyone was heatedly discussing Enshin's talent. They believed that such talent should not be allowed to freeze to death. Enshin noticed that Hongwon stood there with a palpable look of shock on his face, as if he couldn't comprehend what was happening. The leader, observing the event, stood calmly but focused. Hongwon sighed, as if coming out of a hard battle, and unable to bear the tension, put his sword back into its sheath. At that time, Enshin stood, deeply immersed in his thoughts. The next day during training, Hongwon's loud screams echoed throughout the district. All the students who witnessed Hongwon's screams couldn't help but laugh. Their faces were full of sneers, and even the most serious of them couldn't hide their emotions. Hongwon trained his energy with the leader, and his movements became increasingly difficult. He could barely breathe, feeling his strength leaving him. The leader praised Hongwon, recognizing his resilience and perseverance, and asked him to analyze this lesson and draw conclusions from it. After the leader praised and instructed Hongwon, he turned his attention to Ensheng. He noticed how he stood calmly and trained his energy, showing no emotion. "Have you understood the meaning of the principles yet?" the leader asked him. It was Yun Tunmu, who described freedom and liveliness in thought or action. Regardless of the situation, the body is always capable of movement, and continuous, smooth flow is the true essence of Magwanig techniques. And then Enshin needs to comprehend the secrets of the path of martial arts. He believed that it was better to see once than hear 100 times, and therefore decided to demonstrate by his own example. The leader pointed to a statue nearby and asked everyone to look closely. All the students paid attention to the leader's hand, which began to be wrapped in energy. At first it looked like a small glow, but with every second his hand held, the energy became brighter and more powerful. The leader stood focused and serious, his gaze firm and his movements precise. His energy gradually changed, becoming even more focused and stable, as if by clamping down on his strength, he controlled its movements, maintaining a balance between power and calm. "He is pouring out all his strength," Enshin thought to himself. After the leader focused his energy, he took a few deep breaths and hit the statue with all his strength. The impact was so powerful that the air around it shuddered from the explosive wave of energy. The statue shattered from the impact, fragments flying in different directions and falling to the ground. Everyone present watched this with their mouths open, realizing that they had witnessed a true demonstration of skill. "The perfect moment and the optimal strike, your martial arts path draws this trajectory for you," the leader said. If they explore the ways of martial arts perfectly, they will achieve a great strike. In other words, it was necessary to understand where and when it was best to hit the enemy. It will be difficult to master this with just one look, yet it is a skill that only comes with practice, and it is something they will have to work on their whole lives. But Enshin was not willing to work on this all his life, because it seemed to him that he would not succeed. So I decided not to waste a single moment and try it right away. The leader was stunned to learn that Enshin had decided to try himself too. This martial arts path of his is just instinct. Enshin took a deep breath and focused on mastering this technique. But at that time, his thoughts were about whether he should go down this path. Enshin carefully prepared to perform his unique technique, the resonance of a sword strike. He concentrated, analyzing every movement to once again achieve perfect synergy between his body and weapon. The feeling of almost magical power that arises when performing this technique allowed him to focus on small details, because even the slightest mistake could disrupt the entire process. After a few deep breaths, Enshin raised his weapon and, gathering all his strength and concentration, struck the statue with the scabbard. The statue began to crack, and a wave of energy spread around it, spreading throughout the entire training ground. After a few seconds, the statue broke into small pieces. Enshin, seeing the statue disintegrate, could not help but smile. A gleam of satisfaction appeared in his eyes, and pride in the achieved result was reflected on his face. That's the whole secret of the path of martial arts. I understood the basics of Magwanig's technique, Enshin thought to himself. Now all he has to do is put his skills to the test in real-world conditions, applying theory to combat situations and proving his skills in a real test. Satisfied with his achievements, Enshin turned to look back, analyzing the path he had traveled and appreciating all the difficulties left behind. But behind him stood the amazed leader and participants, who, not believing their eyes, looked at his achievements with undisguised surprise and admiration. It probably came out weak, but it's the first time, and to use it properly, you need more real combat experience, he said. When life and death can be decided in an instant, ordinary training means little. Enshin, feeling deeply grateful, turned to the leader and participants, and bowing his head slightly, thanked them for the training. The leader was shocked, his eyes widening as he saw Enshin perform a technique he had thought was almost impossible with ease and confidence. "Now I have to think carefully about how to teach you," said the leader. But Enshin didn't understand what the problem was. The next day, everyone was discussing that their clan elders had recently clashed with the Changcheon group. "And what about the laws of the desert fortress?" Enshin asked Hongwon. "Isn't a fight that occurred outside the training grounds a serious reason for punishment, because such actions violate the rules and can lead to unpredictable consequences?" After that, he didn't wait to ask what exactly caused the conflict and why they decided to resort to a fight, because it could seriously affect their reputation and team unity. And the reason was that student from the Changchun group started a drunken fight and said that under Jin's leadership, Ma Guanik wouldn't learn anything. Enshin was completely confused and could not understand how such a ridiculous reason could become the basis for conflict, his surprise increased by the fact that it looked like a childish, whimsical outburst. But Hongwon believed that he clearly did not know the world of martial arts and how everything worked there. One careless word can turn into a conflict, and only by overcoming such trials can you build your reputation and travel freely later. In his opinion, any victory, regardless of its scale, is a matter of pride, because every step forward is the result of hard work and dedication. Their elders are simply protecting their new ones, and if they said that, they wouldn't know where to go. Enshin assumed that they had personal scores with Magwanik and decided to take advantage of this. If he wants to obtain the fruits of the world tree, which are revered by all noble families, he needs to achieve a lot, and for this, he needs powerful allies. They say that brave warriors must owe their lives to get married, so it would be a good idea to make them your debtors in advance. "I think you're right," he said, addressing Hongwon. If the elders even drew their swords because of him, he couldn't just leave it like that, and he decided to go to them. After these words, Enshin took his sword, carefully and quietly slung it over his back, as if weighing every move. Hongwon was impressed by such spirit. He knew that he was no stranger to the true feelings of a warrior. After a while, Enshin and Hongwon arrived at the senior students. The seniors didn't understand why they came because they didn't have training today. But Enshin seemed not to be listening to them. His gaze was focused and firmly directed at the leader. He walked towards him, his steps were confident, and his face reflected seriousness. The elders looking at him didn't understand why he was so stressed at the beginning. At this stage, respect is more important. They approached the leader and without saying a word, calmly bowed, thereby greeting him. "Do you have any problems with training?" he asked. Enshin expressed a desire for a duel, and the leader, without objection, suggested that he contact one of the elders. But Enshin stated that he did not want a duel with Ma Guanyok's group. "I want a duel with someone from Changchun," the guy said confidently. After this statement, everyone was shocked because no one was clearly expecting it. The master thought it was because of yesterday, but assured him that he shouldn't worry so much. But Enshin explained that he had long been fascinated by Chang Qian's techniques and would like to try them personally. The master was surprised by his enthusiasm, but he even liked that he shared the feelings of the elders. Enshin begged the master to allow him, as he wanted to fight with the renowned swordsmanship using the true form of Ma Guanig. He could gain experience, try other techniques, and also gain the trust of his elders, which was a triple benefit. But there was a problem that he had never seen Changchun's combat vehicles, nor fought them side by side. A duel was not a problem, but Changchun would not spare him. But this was exactly what Enshin needed. Seeing his serious mood, all the elders were shocked. They began to shout loudly that this was the spirit of the true leader of the desert fortress, and they couldn't wait to see what he would become in the future, their voices filled with both admiration and respect for his determination. The master agreed, recognizing that Enshin's determination deserved respect. And he promised to pass on your request to the head of Changchun. The next day, Enshin had an exhibition fight with Chang Qian. Everyone present was lively discussing the upcoming battle, expressing their assumptions and opinions. Everyone was full of curiosity as to whether Enshin would be able to last even 10 seconds against Chang Cheon. Everyone thought that a newcomer in white clothes could last more than 10 seconds against a blue one. For many, this seemed almost impossible, as Chang Cheon was known for his incredible speed and experience. The leaders of the Changchun and Ma Guanik factions gathered to watch the battle. Khan Cholmok suddenly raised his hand and pointed his finger at Enshin. "If this newbie can hold out for 10 seconds, then I'm ready to put one of Changchun's spiritual pills in," he said. However, Ma Jin, observing the situation, considered it too high a stake. Han Cholmok was absolutely confident in his choice and took Ma Jin's restraint as a sign of fear. And the honor of Ma Guanig and Changchun was at stake. He clearly wouldn't joke with that. In the end, Ma Jin agreed to such a bet and accepted it. Khan Cholmok believed that a leader was obliged to believe in his subordinate, so he was confident in his student's victory. After these words, the atmosphere became even more tense. Everyone fell silent, watching Enshin and Changqian prepare for battle. "White from Ma Guanig, you say your name is Zhong Enshin?" Ensheng's opponent asked. Enshin, upon hearing the question, nodded confidently, confirming his words, after which he bowed and greeted him. "A warrior in blue clothes, everyone starts with white, but if you advance in your craft, you will get blue. And time does not matter here. Sometimes it takes more than 10 years to transition from white to blue, but even the greatest masters of the great sects are considered among the blue warriors of the desert fortress. I have been training the Changqian sword for 20 years. They say the sword has no eyes, but the sword of a true master definitely has eyes," said the opponent. After that, he warned that he had no equal in sparring and would not hold back, and asked to take this into account. Enshin understood everything, but his expression remained indifferent, as if all the words had no meaning to him at all. After Enshin confirmed his readiness, his opponent began to slowly draw his sword from its scabbard. This sword began to vibrate invisibly, creating a special energy around it that could be felt in the air. And an incredible force began to emanate from the mental sphere, like an invisible stream of energy that enveloped his opponent's body. Those present felt the atmosphere around them change, becoming thick and full of tension. At that time, Enshin was lost in thought, wondering what kind of sword mystery the blue warriors of Changcheon used. But at the same time, he had to put aside all unnecessary thoughts and concentrate on the fight. He didn't care what his opponent was capable of, he was here to reveal his new skills. "I yield to you, you can make the first move," said the opponent. Without wasting any time, Enshin abruptly activated his time play technique. After that, he accelerated sharply and began to attack his opponent at high speed. He struck a powerful blow with all his strength, but his opponent managed to block the attack in time, preventing him from causing serious damage. However, this blow was so powerful that it was very difficult for the opponent to contain it, and he barely managed to keep from losing his balance. However, he did not stop and continued to attack, tirelessly trying to break through the enemy's defenses, not giving him time to recover. He was serious and focused. Every move was precise and deliberate, because he knew that a single mistake could cost him victory. However, the enemy could barely contain the attack. His defense cracked under the pressure, and each new blow seemed more and more difficult for him. Enshin attacked non-stop, not giving the enemy a minute to rest. His blows were swift and relentless, like a wave that constantly rolled towards the enemy, a spectacle that shocked those present. Looking at the skills of this young man, you forget to even breathe, the master thought to himself. But with John Yunseon's experience, the only option for victory is to seize the initiative now. Enshin had incredible strength, which was evident in every blow. His power was such that his every move seemed capable of breaking even the strongest defenses. At that time, Enshin realized that the play of time accelerates the mind, and he has grown greatly since he came here. The principles of martial arts accumulate in a body tempered by the art of movement of his clan, and the curvier the trajectory of the sword, the more the back muscles are involved. And if you apply rotation, the energy forms a strong vortex. Those present watched what was happening, and it so struck them that they were speechless. The entire scene was filled with tension, and even those accustomed to such fights could not take their eyes off this incredible struggle. Enshin continued to attack his opponent incredibly quickly, his blows flying at such speed that the opponent barely had time to react. I think I've mastered another new technique, Enshin thought to himself. He attacked him again, giving his opponent no chance to counterattack. After that, he struck him on the arm, and the sword, torn from his grip, flew into the air, sliding across a few meters before falling to the ground, after which Enshin instantly placed his sword against his opponent's throat, stopping his movements. The opponent could do nothing, feeling the cold metal on his neck. But Enshin backed away from the fight, pulling his sword away from his opponent's throat. Everyone froze at this turn of events, as if time had stopped for a moment. Everyone's mouths dropped open because they couldn't believe what they saw. But in a second, everyone started shouting loudly that the white man had won, filling the arena with loud cheers. People could not contain their emotions, as the result of this fight was a shock to everyone who witnessed such incredible skill and strength. But Enshin believed that he was simply lucky because he had won, simply because a sudden burst of inspiration had added strength to his momentum at the right moment. If they fought again, things could turn out completely differently. Enshin thanked him for allowing him to enjoy his amazing level of swordsmanship up close and for the glorious battle. But the opponent turned around and, despite his defeat, went to pick up his sword. "Your skill is beyond your years. You are surprisingly gifted in fencing," he said. So young, but his strength is simply incredible. But there were those who were jealous, because Ma Guaneg received a treasure in the form of this gifted boy. At that time, Ma Jin reached out to Han Cholmak to receive his reward for winning the dispute. Enshin pondered what to call this technique and decided on Chukma General. Suddenly he was called by the master, whose calm but authoritative voice cut through his thoughts, after which the master unexpectedly threw him a box. "What kind of box is this?" Enshin asked with interest, opening it. When he opened the box, he was shocked, because inside was the legendary Chengqian spiritual pill. She was now rightfully his because he had won her in a fair fight. The next day, intensive training took place in Changchun. "Really a terrible guy," Bai Mei said. To defeat such an experienced swordsman as the blue-winged fan from Changcheon was something. He is not only talented and hard-working, but also modest, polite, plus he has a unique ability to grasp martial arts techniques on the fly. Cheong Myung agreed with her words because he had never seen such potential before. Every time she used the technique in sparring with someone else in his presence, he easily creates the same movement in a new, elegant form. It's even a bit uncomfortable to use mediocre techniques in front of him. Balin believed that it was some kind of innate ability to catch the very essence of techniques. It was as if he had always known them, Cheong Myung said, smiling. Meanwhile, the master and Enshin were preparing to use the Changcheon spirit pill. The master did not know what fate of the pill Enshin would be able to absorb. Usually it's around 60 to 70%, but depending on the circumstances, it could be less. Even if she doesn't live up to his expectations, he shouldn't put pressure on himself. Enshin can damage his energy core or Abo meridian if he is not careful. The key to absorbing the pill is to allow its energy to circulate with his qi until it is completely dissolved. If the flow of his qi becomes unstable, the master will intervene, and so he must remain calm and go with the flow. Enshin swallowed the pill, and within a moment he felt a powerful energy begin to spread inside him, filling every cell of his body. It was like an explosion of pure power, surging like a raging river, carving new paths in his energy channels. Suddenly the energy of the pill began to extend beyond Enshin's body, spreading around him like an invisible wave. The master watched this silently, remaining completely still, but his gaze radiated deep concentration. At that very moment, Chongmeng and Bai Mei, who were nearby, felt a wave of this powerful energy, and they immediately realized that it had already begun. They were curious about how strong their youngest would be after absorbing the energy pill. At that time, the pill continued to pass through Enshin's body, dissolving into it like a powerful stream of pure energy. This was his first experience of absorption, but his ki flow didn't even flinch. The master didn't even have to intervene. After a while, the energy began to gradually stop and dissipate, as if a cloud that had covered the entire space had melted. Enshin slowly opened his eyes, and you could see a new depth in his gaze, as if he had seen the world in a new way. The master congratulated him on being able to fully absorb the energy of the pill. "My chi has noticeably strengthened," Enshin said, looking at his hands. While the master could not believe that he was able to absorb all the energy, alone without any help. With the increase in internal energy, he could feel things he hadn't even noticed before. And then it dawned on him that his elders were all over the perimeter of the region. He asked his suspicions. The master confirmed his words. Enshin was silent for a moment, but still decided to ask what was bothering him. He turned to his master. "Why are you all so kind to me?" he asked. The master looked at him and smiled. "It's not about you. It's natural for a group to take care of all its members," the master replied. In the world of martial arts, where life and death are often at stake, solidarity is natural. The higher your combat skills, the better it is for the Magwanig faction. Enshin simply listened silently, carefully observing the master's every word. Evening came, and the silence that enveloped the land grew even deeper. Enshin continued to practice his technique in his room, completely absorbed in the process. He noticed that his internal energy had increased significantly. He became curious about how much stronger he had become after receiving the energy, so he decided to test his new abilities. He quickly left his room and headed to the training hall. Suddenly a voice spoke to him, interrupting his concentration. It was Bai Mei Li who quietly approached Enshin, standing at the edge of his training area. "Couldn't resist and came here to train?" she asked. She also got inspired to train while watching him fight. Enshin noticed that she had been promoted and congratulated her on this achievement. But Bai Mei Li didn't think so because she thought it was just a small step forward. After which she apologized if he wanted to train alone and suggested sparring. But Enshin didn't mind, because you can train yourself at any time, and learning something new from the elder swordsman Ilian is a very rare opportunity. But she asked to be called just Buck, because that was more than enough for her. After a short pause, both began to prepare for sparring. Enshin looked closely at Bai Mei Li and, sensing the seriousness of the moment, said he would start first. Bai waved her hand. The gesture was calm, but there was clear confidence in it. She was ready for any attack and was not afraid to accept the challenge. Enshin, sensing the challenge from Bai Mei Li, changed his tactics drastically. He didn't wait or hesitate and began to attack even faster. Suddenly, at one point, when Enshin made another dash and swung at her, Bai Mei Li reacted with lightning speed, and in an instant, she intercepted his sword, conveniently and skillfully grabbing it by the blade, preventing him from continuing the attack. After Bai Mei Li intercepted his sword, she instantly seized the opportunity. Holding his hand tightly, she deftly moved his hand to an uncomfortable position for him and prepared to strike with the other. But Enshin, watching her movements, reacted instantly. He felt her hand holding him tightly, but gathering all his energy, he quickly raised his free hand and made a powerful movement, jumping back. Bai Mei Li did not stop and continued to attack without any hesitation. Bai Mei Li, feeling that her attacks were not producing the desired result, decided to employ a new strategy. She concentrated all her strength in her fist, slowly and intently concentrating her energy. Enshin, seeing Bai Mei Li concentrate her strength in her fist, reacted instantly. He also gathered his energy, felt it overflowing his body, and directed it into his hand, a sharp movement, and there was his fist ready for a collision. Instantly, energy erupted, pouring from the point of impact, sparkling and extending beyond their bodies. As their hands collided, Bai Mei Li's energy literally broke through his defenses, pressing down on him with such force that every part of his body began to feel immense tension. Enshin, overwhelmed by the energy, abruptly jumped forward a few meters. He didn't expect such strength from Bai Mei Li. Her blow was so powerful that even his fastest reaction couldn't completely prevent the consequences. Bai Mei Li, noticing his desperate struggle and quick reaction, smiled and praised him. "Do you practice Chungen?" Enshin asked. She confirmed his words. A swordsman who studies Magwanghul cannot rely only on his sword. Close combat techniques such as Chungen are extremely effective. Even if your opponent is able to strengthen the Qi body, she allowed this protection to be destroyed. But the effectiveness of Chungen depends on the ability to properly invest internal energy into the blow. Enshin listened carefully to her words, intently watching Bai Mei's every move. Enshin asked if he could share his observations as a newbie, feeling that her experience could be useful for further development. "I've been quite sensitive to qi since childhood, so I noticed a problem with your control," Enshin said. These words hurt Bai Mei, and she became a little nervous. Bai Mei didn't quite believe Enshin's words. She doubted that a newcomer who had just started his journey could have noticed something like that. Enshin said that was a bit wrong, but she didn't understand at the time how he knew about the control problems. But he explained that he does not see the flow of qi inside the body, he only observes the flow as it comes out with the energy. Bai found it hard to believe his words. This sense of perception is only given to purple ranked masters. A purple rank master is the top of the hierarchy of martial arts mastery in the Desert Fortress. First comes white, then blue, black, and then only purple. Bai Mei, still hesitant, allowed Enshin to share his observations. She decided to listen to him, although she wasn't sure that the newcomer could notice anything meaningful. Enshin began to say that if you look closely at her palm technique, so in his opinion it is more suitable for investing qi than any other technique. The very nature of her internal energy seems more suited to close combat techniques. And if you invest more qi into this technique, it will become much more powerful. But Bai Mei suddenly stopped Enshin as he started to speak. "Do you have some idiot in front of you who doesn't know how to distribute internal energy? Or do you think I'm not putting in enough qi?" she asked. Enshin stopped abruptly when he realized his words might be taken unfavorably. He instantly apologized to Bai Mei, realizing he had probably said something unnecessary or inappropriate for such an experienced fighter. Bai Mei softened when she saw Enshin's apology. She realized that her reaction was overly critical and decided that she should apologize to him. She thanked him for his observation. After that, Bai Mei nodded silently, gathering her thoughts, and left. Enshin remained standing still, watching Bai Mei walk away, his gaze attentive but slightly thoughtful. At that time, Bai Mei came to the master. Pondering over what had happened, she expressed her thoughts, saying that her fighting skills were revealed thanks to Enshin's observation. After that, Bai Mei asked the chairman if the master had mentioned to Enshin the origin of her skills. "What kind of fool do you think I would tell him something so important?" asked the master. In that case, Bai Mei had no idea where Enshin could have learned about the origin of her skills. The master suggested that he had glimpsed the techniques we stubbornly develop from the lost art of the divine demon. The master believed that Enshin's boy was special. Even if you went around the whole world, it would be difficult to find a similar talent. A person like him only comes into the world once in a generation. Even those whose skill is undeniable will confirm my words. "Do you think he's really at such a high level?" Bai asked. But the master was sure that he was undoubtedly the future elite of our hierarchy. It doesn't matter what others think of him, but it's definitely not worth dismissing his words as advice for a beginner. But Bai didn't understand what he meant. Was it really worth discussing the art of the divine demon with him? The master confirmed her assumption because her self-study has its limits, and he doesn't have time. In such conditions, his advice is very appropriate. The master believed that Enshin had the traits of a great master. He noticed in him a rare ability for observation, strategic thinking, and rapid mastery of techniques. The master also noticed that Enshin has a unique ability to adapt everything he learns to himself. He doesn't just copy techniques, but adapts them to his own strengths and fighting style. The only problem the master noticed in Enshinov was his character, but it was at this moment that the master received a small task that could be a chance for Enshin to correct these traits. The master asked Bai Mei to go down and observe how Enshin coped with life and death circumstances with his comrades. By watching Enshin deal with life and death circumstances alongside his comrades, she could gauge not only his fighting skills, but also understand his true character and whether he could be trusted. The master was sure that in 5 years, Enshin would definitely lead Manhwa. His growth and ability to adapt, along with the constant development of his fighting skills, made the master believe that he could become a leader. The next day, early in the morning, they set off on their mission. Bai Mei, Enshin, Hongwan, and Qiongmeng mounted their horses and set off. On the way, Bai Mei couldn't stop thinking about the master's words. She replayed his instructions and assumptions about Enshin over and over in her head. The master was confident in his potential. And finally, they arrived at the Jingping County Post Office. Hongwan was glad that they had finally arrived, for the journey had been long and tiring. They had spent 10 whole days on horseback, and it had clearly taken its toll on their endurance. While they tied the horses to the trees, Enshin remained in his thoughts, remembering the conversation with the master. Someone from the cult of the bloody flame is terrorizing the village, regularly killing livestock and destroying crops, the master said. All this happened in Jingping County in southern Shanxi. There are groups in Shanxi that could handle this themselves, but there was a recent incident involving the theft of elixirs from the Huashan sect. Just don't say that the stolen pills are Jasodon, as if they can be compared to the great revival of Shaolin, Hongwan asked. But it seemed like the scale of this mission required the mobilization of the entire civil society of Shanxi, and they lacked resources. That's why they asked for their help. The master decided that this task required more strength and experience, so he sent 4 students, including Enshin. For Enshin, the Blood Flame clan remained a painful memory. He hated them with all his heart, because this clan was a symbol of loss and suffering in his life. "We sent the request so long ago, and they only arrived now?" A disgruntled voice broke the silence. When they returned, they saw the man who, gesturing, continued to express his displeasure. His gaze was bitter, and his tone was filled with disappointment. Enshin looked at the man carefully, trying to understand who he was. His demeanor and the confidence in his voice indicated an important position, but to everyone this person was completely unfamiliar. The man, casting a critical glance in their direction, contemptuously called them suckers, his words harsh, emphasizing his disdain and doubt of their abilities. The man clearly doubted their abilities, believing that they were unlikely to be able to handle their abusers. Enshin, feeling growing irritation, wondered what exactly this man wanted from them. Many of the local officials are ignorant in such a remote area and have probably never seen a real martial arts master. Therefore, some equate swordsmen in the service of the empire with their personal cleaners. Enshin wondered if the man's speech acupuncture point could be sealed to stop his incessant remarks. Chong Myung without hesitation allowed it, saying that less talking would mean more time for action. Before the man could say a word, Enshin instantly struck him, striking with a precise and quick movement the acupuncture point that blocked the ability to speak. The man shuddered, and his lips became motionless. Enshin, looking at the silent man, added with cold composure that his remarks were of little interest to them. After Enshin finished his short but decisive remark, they calmly went about their task. Hongwan, noticing Enshin's actions, asked if he had already mastered acupuncture techniques. Enshin calmly confirmed his words, making it clear that he now possessed these skills and was ready to use them if necessary. "You know, I think it's not really appropriate to address you as you are anymore," Hongwan thought. From that moment on, Hongwan decided to call Enshin Young Master Zhong, recognizing his skills and progress. Enshin, with a smile on his face, accepted the title, joking about how he should now be honored. These words struck a chord with Hongwan, and a smile appeared on his face, his shoulders squared, as if emphasizing his new role in this dynamic. Suddenly, Chong Myung placed his hand on Enshin's shoulder, causing him to briefly be surprised. "You know the unspoken law of non-interference. The government and the martial arts world don't interfere in each other's affairs," he said. "But they, unlike many other fighters, can afford a little more in communicating with officials, since they act on behalf of the ruling family. And they are pleased to put in place fools like that man who think they can reprimand them. Such is the privilege of a desert fortress fighter." But Bai, noticing this moment, paid attention to Enshin not to overdo it with this. But Bai, unable to resist commenting, added that she couldn't help but notice how great it turned out. Suddenly, Hongwan heard strange sounds and saw silhouettes approaching the village. This caught his attention, and he immediately focused. Hongwan, sensing the tension, asked the others to take a look at what was happening. There were loud screams, which added even more anxiety to the atmosphere. The sounds came from the direction where the silhouettes were approaching, and it became clear that something was happening. At the same time, a strange and sinister laughter began to be heard from behind the silhouettes, which made everyone even more wary. It was a large man holding a child in his arms, and his voice echoed with deep irritation as he shouted at her to be quiet. Enshin's blood boiled in his veins when he recognized this man. He was one of the representatives of the cult of the Blood Flame, known for his cruelty and ruthlessness. Without wasting a moment, Enshin ran straight towards him, his steps quick and decisive, for he could not afford to hesitate at such a moment. Chong Myung also ran after him without hesitating for a second. Cheon Myung surpassed Enshin thanks to his Myung clan's precognition technique, which was known for its incredible speed and maneuverability. Hongwan and Bai also overtook him, each using their own special skills. Enshin began to feel angry at himself for being left behind. His heart beat faster, and he felt disappointment overflowing him. All this time, he wasn't particularly keen on movement techniques, and the training room was a bit lacking. At that time, a man from the cult of the Blood Flame began to injure the locals, and his cruelty knew no bounds. People who became victims of his aggression did not even have time to defend themselves, because he was extremely strong and relentless. He didn't feel sorry for people at all. He laughed at them as if it was some kind of game. His laughter was cold and malicious, full of contempt for those he chose as his victims. But at that time, a child was screaming in his arms, and he was ordering her to be quiet, further intensifying the atmosphere of cruelty. But suddenly he heard a noise behind him and turned around. But Chong Myung had already begun to attack him from above. His movements were lightning fast and precise as he used his precognition technique to execute the attack at great speed. His blow was powerful and quick because he knew that every second mattered, and he had to stop this ruthless enemy. After which they exchanged glances. Then Chong Myung jumped back a few meters, ready for a new move. He quickly assessed the situation, taking into account his opponent's every move. But suddenly the enemy noticed that something was missing in his hands. He looked down sharply, and his eyes flashed with surprise when he realized that the child he was holding had disappeared. She was in Chong Myung's arms. He held her firmly but carefully, protecting her from the danger that had not yet passed. His gaze was calm and focused, while confusion appeared on his opponent's face. But the enemy drew attention to his shoulders, where there was the sign of the desert fortress. It was not an ordinary symbol, but a marking that indicated belonging to one of the strongest and most threatening organizations. But suddenly Bai appeared from the other side, moving quickly and steadily, her steps carrying determination and readiness for battle. But suddenly the enemy, smiling, began to release his spiritual energy. The air around him trembled, and the energy itself began to grow, absorbing the surrounding space. He began to scream loudly, and this scream, filled with rage and determination, cut through the silence around him. His energy began to literally tear the air apart, causing the earth to tremble from a powerful eruption of spiritual power. But suddenly, with all his strength, he bent into the sky. His body, as if lifted by an invisible force, broke away from the ground, and he instantly flew into the air, leaving all the limits of his usual attacks. He suddenly turned and started running away. Cheong Myung and Bai realized that they wouldn't have time to catch him. His speed was extraordinary, and even with all their fighting skills, they couldn't handle his unexpected movement. They were curious about who this guy was. His speed and strength were impressive, and his behavior during the fight and avoidance of defeat left many questions. And judging by his speed, he expends life force to use such a movement technique. But she turned her attention back to the place where their comrades were staying, as well as to the situation unfolding around them. Behind her ran the gasping Hong Won and Enshin, their breathing heavy, both looking tired after the fast pursuit, but their determination remained unwavering. After the four of them got together, circumstances became even more tense. Bai turned to Hong Won, mentioning his fighting skills. She noted that they were completely in line with his white level, and even slightly exceeded expectations for this stage. Bai, noting that Hong Won had all the necessary fighting skills, also noted that he lacked stamina, which was an important detail, because even the best fighting techniques cannot be effective if there is not enough strength for a long-term confrontation. Enshin was deeply disappointed in himself, feeling that he had not been able to reach the level he aspired to. His fundamental skills are surprisingly well developed, a level of mastery rarely found among the 8 clans. Looking at how he moves without using techniques, no one in Magwanig's group will be able to catch up with him. Even Main, and who cares about someone else's speed anyway? Chong Myung noticed that Enshin looked depressed. His usual determined and calm expression changed to one that expressed doubt and disappointment. Seeing Enshin in this state, Meng turned to him. He offered to teach him his movement technique. Enshin was so shocked that he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Does Meng really intend to teach him the technique of moving? But Meng confidently confirmed his words. The movement technique is not considered a full-fledged martial art of their clan. It was just a little walking lesson, although most of the townspeople were too much for it. Although Meng was confident that Enshin would be able to handle it, he still warned him against premature joy, as no one in the Magwang sect had been able to master it yet. He once taught it to those who wanted to learn, but no one ever succeeded. Although it is called a displacement technique, there was no system in this technique. Suddenly, energy began to rage beneath men, blinding everything around him. How is energy at the tips of your fingers, even though there was no activation of the flow? Enshin thought to himself. But Meng emphasized again that this was just a walking lesson. After that, he began to climb the tree trunk, as if he were walking on the ground. He did it so easily, as if his every step was natural and effortless. Without effort, Meng reached a large branch at the top of the tree. At the same time, his presence was almost imperceptible, as if he left no trace in the air. Enshin carefully memorized his every step, recording the smallest details. He couldn't help but admire the Meng clan's incredible technique, amazed by its skill and sophistication. Qi is not used, but some kind of energy supported his body. Even the descent to the ground was so smooth, as if he simply floated away, like a leaf gently falling to the ground. "So, did you understand everything?" asked Meng. Enshin realized that it was some kind of wind created using energy, but it did not have the same powers as the Meng clan. Meng couldn't believe that Enshin could understand this, because he was only observing the flow of energy without interfering with it. Enshin couldn't understand if that was why Meng had shown him his technique. But he understood something, and thanking men expressed his gratitude. "I understand if you analyze the movement based on the fighting forms and allocate energy accordingly," Enshin said. But before he could finish, Hongwon interrupted him. Hongwon realized that these thoughts could drag on for a long time, so he decided to leave and find a place for them to spend the night. When they went to rest, Enshin was still turning over in his mind what he had seen, the energy, and the nature of men's technique. He meditated, focusing his energy throughout his body, trying to feel and capture every flow of it. At that time, Meng was resting outside on a tree, enjoying the peace. Suddenly Meng noticed Enshin walking outside and heading towards the playground, as if with some purpose or intention. He stood in the middle of the court, and his legs began to glow with energy, as if a stream of power was flowing through him. What he saw immediately left Men speechless, and his eyes opened wide in surprise and admiration. He found it incredible, because Enshin had mastered this technique in just a few hours, which was almost impossible for most. A new day had dawned, the birds were singing merrily, breaking the silence, and pecking worms from the ground, enjoying the morning sun. At this time, Hongwon was training on the court, performing exercises with concentration. He couldn't believe that it had already been 3 months since they got there, and Enshin had already mastered the arts of the Meng clan. Meng did not deny that he had the makings of a great master. Even for their clan, this was not the easiest task. After these words, Bai's words flashed before his eyes. She remembered the master's instructions that she must go and see for herself the inside of the future leader to understand his true nature. "By the way, was it worth sending Enshin alone?" Hongwon asked worriedly. Bai believed that people were too scared to leave them alone. But besides, it was a reconnaissance mission, and she was sure that Enshin would easily screw up this task. At that time, a loud stomping of feet and a rapid run could be heard in the forest, breaking the silence and seeming close. It was Enshin, speeding through the forest, his every step confident and rhythmic, as if he were part of nature. He felt an incredible lightness, speed, and a distribution of strength that was incomparable to his previous experience. Every movement seemed natural and effortless, and it gave him pleasure as he felt his body harmoniously interacting with the environment. After some time, he reached the building where the people from the cult of Bloodflame were. "Finally, I found their lair," Enshin thought to himself. But suddenly he paid attention to what was happening near the den. What he saw so struck him that it took away his ability to speak, and he remained spellbound, unable to utter a word. A man from the cult of Bloodflame sitting on a rock calmly ate a child. This eerie picture filled Enshin with horror and uncontrollable anger. He devoured the child miserably, like a beast, completely immersed in his monstrous meal, which further inflamed Enshin's anger. After that, the man suddenly froze, raised his head and turned to the side, sensing Enshin's presence. He asked in a hoarse voice who Enshin was, looking at him carefully, as if trying to gauge his strength and intentions. Looking at Enshin's clothes, he instantly realized that he belonged to the desert fortress. Enshin's eyes burned with anger and hatred, as if they reflected all the anger and indignation caused by what he had seen. The man slowly began to wipe his mouth with his sleeve, maintaining an indifferent expression on his face. After that, he calmly asked if Enshin had come here alone. When he realized that Enshin had come alone, his face twisted with malice, and he began to shout loudly, calling Enshin a fool. He could not believe that he had dared to come alone. But he didn't have time to finish when Enshin, with lightning speed, in one precise movement, ran his sword across his neck. Blood gushed in all directions, contaminating the ground around, creating dark pools that quickly engulfed everything around. His body fell heavily to the ground, and Enshin, without turning around, stood with his back to him, maintaining a calm, cold look. After that, Enshin turned his attention to the boy. His face was haggard, and there were still tears in his eyes, indicating fear and suffering. Enshin was filled with various emotions: anger, compassion, and disappointment. He remembered his family and his clan, who were killed by the cult of the blood flame. The pain and hatred of these memories filled his heart, and his sword, as if responding to the emotions, ignited with bright energy. "I won't leave these reptiles alone," Enshin thought to himself. He promised the boy that as soon as he was done with them, he would give him a proper burial. After that, he concentrated all his energy, distributing it throughout his body and weapons, feeling a flow of power permeate him, giving incredible power to every movement. After that, his power flared and swept through the building like an invisible wave, destroying everything in its path. He struck with his sword Ma Guangol, and it cut through the air with incredible speed. After that, he struck the building with his sword, and a powerful blast of energy tore through the walls, shattering them into pieces. Inside the building were people from the Red Cult, who, upon hearing the impact, reacted instantly, but it was too late. They saw a silhouette appearing among the ruins, but could not understand what was happening. It was Enshin, hooked and angry, his eyes blazing with hatred. After that, he struck him with all his strength in the chest with his sword, and the blow passed through his body. "The cult of the bloody flame, because you live by the principle of survival of the fittest, right?" Enshin asked. In this case, Enshin would suggest being killed by someone much stronger than him. After these words, Enshin without hesitation delivered the final blow, finishing him off. Then he heard strange rustling sounds and a low hum behind him, which seemed to be getting closer and closer. This rumble came from the middle of a cave nearby. An even greater surge of energy is coming from this cave, Enshin thought to himself, from which he concluded that this was not just a shelter for members of the Blood Tribe cult, but rather the cult's base. After that, Enshin stopped abruptly, listening carefully to the sounds coming from the cave. Suddenly, members of the cult ran out of the cave, their faces distorted with rage. They shouted loudly, accusing Enshin of being audacious and daring to attack them. They rushed towards him, full of hatred and determination, intent on killing him. Weapons gleamed in their hands, and their every movement radiated aggression because they wanted him to pay in blood. Enshin noticed them rushing towards him, and his gaze sharpened. But he still stood firm, ready to meet this attack with his indomitable strength. After that, Enshin gathered all his energy, and in an instant, he abruptly jumped towards them. His movement was lightning fast and precise, like that of a predator pouncing on prey. The sword in his hands shone, ready to deal with anyone who dared to stand in his way. Enshin, like a whirlwind, cut through each of them with his sword. His blows were quick, precise, and merciless, leaving behind only bodies that fell helplessly to the ground. In an instant, everything around was covered in blood, and Enshin stood in the middle of this bloody scene. "Guy from the desert fortress, what have you forgotten here?" asked an ominous voice from the cave. Enshin began to look closely and listen to the voice that came from the cave. A silhouette began to emerge from the cave, dark and vague, but clearly massive, its steps slow but sure. And Enshin realized that the ominous energy he had initially perceived as coming from them was not actually theirs. A man emerged from the cave, his figure enveloped in a dark aura, and his every step seemed as heavy as the very earth beneath him. Enshin began to examine him carefully, listening to every sound and analyzing every movement. He was completely different from anyone Enshin had encountered before. He had heard rumors that when a person reaches a certain level of internal energy, their hair color can visually change. In this case, it could only be one person. It was the leader of this cult, the Supreme Master. In the Blood Tribe sect, he is called the Blood Demon with a sword. "Your suffering will help quench my thirst for blood," he said. Enshin was preparing for this fight, his body tense and his mind focused. Blood Demon with a sword, a title worn by the leaders of the Blood Flame sect's units. Among the civilian population and the lower classes of the fighting world, they are equated with the Reapers of Death. There are very few masters skilled enough to kill them. "I'll attack first before he gets close," Enshin thought to himself, preparing to attack. That's how he won last time, attacking before his opponent had time to react. He gathered his energy, and the sword in his hands began to emit a bright light, ready for any danger. Looking at Enshin, the master of the Blood Flame cult couldn't understand if everyone in the desert fortress really thought so highly of themselves. But Enshin paid no attention to his words, and without wasting time attacked him with a powerful blow, using his timepiece technique. The sword cut through the air with incredible speed, and each movement was so precise that it seemed as if time itself had stopped at that moment, concentrating all the energy in one blow. The master did not expect such a strong blow and barely restrained it, trying with all his might to repel this powerful attack. He was thrown several meters away, barely able to stand. But Enshin did not stop and continued to attack continuously, his every move ruthless and precise. Each new blow and each movement was so fast that the master barely had time to block them and was struck by Enshin. But this audacity infuriated Enshin. He felt anger and hatred overflowing him, and each subsequent blow was filled with even greater force. Memories of his family and clan, who were killed by the Blood Flame cult clan, reappeared before his eyes. These paintings hit his soul hard, reviving pain and disappointment. I am no longer the person I was before, he thought to himself. Enshin grabbed the master's hand and using all his strength squeezed it. After that, Enshin began to twist the master's hand with his strength, causing him to feel pain that tore through tissue and bone. This angered the master, and he, using the remnants of his strength, tried to attack Enshin with his other hand. His blow was full of fury, but Enshin, sensing his intent, was ready to defend and attack. But in a moment the master was left without another hand. Enshin, with incredible speed and precision, cut it off with one decisive movement. He began to scream loudly in pain, his screams echoing around him. Without wasting a moment, Enshin prepared to counterattack, his movements precise, quick, and ruthless. After that, Enshin plunged his sword into the master with one sharp movement. The blow was precise and deadly, and the master did not even have time to resist. He began to spit blood, his body shuddered in pain, and each breath of air became heavier. But Enshin thrust his sword even harder, deepening the blow. The master could not hold back the pain, his eyes filled with despair, because he could not believe that he would die at the hands of someone like Enshin. But Enshin realized that he had previously caused pain to others, but had never felt it himself. Then, with a sharp movement, Enshin pulled out his sword, leaving the master in a terrible state. The master's energy gradually faded. Like a dying flame, Enshin stood above him, calmly watching as his enemy lost his last strength. Enshin sighed after the battle, his breathing becoming even but deep, tired from the struggle. After that, he turned around and began to look around, assessing the situation. But his eye fell on the pit that was near him. After some time, Enshin dumped all the corpses of the local murdered residents there. But there were people, from small children to grown men. Every corpse that fell into the pit was a victim of the barbarity that destroyed an entire generation. Enshin's heart was filled with sadness and rage, because he saw before him not just bodies, but lives lost by all, who would never be able to return. "Peach blossoms will cover your peace," Enshin said. After that, Enshin returned back to Bai Meng and Hongwan, but they were shocked when they saw Enshin. He was covered in blood, holding a child in his arms, and his gaze was murderous. They jumped in surprise and shock, and immediately took the child from Enshin's arms. He asked to look at this child. His voice was calm, but there was a deep anxiety in it. Bai was curious about what had happened, but more than anything she was concerned about whether he was okay, as he had clearly been in a violent fight. With all these events, Enshin didn't even notice that all his clothes were covered in blood. But he reassured them that everything was fine and it wasn't his blood. He explained that he had found a place where a branch of the Blood Tribe sect was located, and everything that happened was the result of a meeting with them. Bai was digesting all the information, trying to make sense of everything that had happened, and suddenly it hit her. And not only her, everyone was shocked by what they heard. Enshin explained that there were 8 members of the Blood Flame sect there, all of whom were causing trouble in the village. And he also reminded me that there was one strong man with black and red hair. Black and red hair, a bloody demon with a sword, so what? Bai said. From which it could be concluded that this was definitely one of the groups of the Blood Flame sect. Hearing this, Men confidently took up his sword. His hands were strong and his gaze determined. He couldn't believe they were so close, whatever their goals were. The Blood Flame sect, the enemy of the desert fortress, they were obligated to eradicate this threat. They turned to Enshin. They believed that he had done a great job, and he should now rest and leave everything else to them. But just as they were about to leave, Enshin stopped them, saying that there was no need to go there anymore. He explained that all that was needed was to send a patrol. And people were only needed to help remove the bodies of the victims. "You're saying we'll need a patrol to clear the bodies?" Hongwan asked. Bai wondered if Enshin meant to say that he defeated the blood demon with the sword and all the sect members single-handedly. But Enshin confirmed all their guesses. He calmly replied that he had indeed defeated the blood demon and the entire sect single-handedly, although he admitted that it was not an easy task. But Enshin thanked men for showing him the movement technique. He admitted that without this technique, it would have been much more difficult for him to deal with enemies. But they were shocked by what they heard and couldn't believe it. The bloody demon with the sword has an unusual ability to regenerate. He didn't even strain Enshin. Enshin was surprised by what he heard, because he didn't know this. It is very difficult to defeat a bloody demon with a sword. But even those who were able to often died from a stab in the back, as they were unaware of its ability to regenerate. After those words, Enshin pulled someone out of the bag by the hair, but he put it on the table, ignoring the reaction of those present. "I didn't even notice that he had such an ability," he said. Everyone was shocked by what they saw. Myung, Hongwon, and Bai couldn't believe their eyes. Enshin thought about it, because regeneration was dangerous. He understood that even with such great power and the ability to regenerate, there was always a risk that his enemies could use it against him. Ta Man sighed with a smile and nervousness, realizing all his power, and confirmed that they really have the ability to regenerate. After a while, they arrived back at the desert fortress. Bai and Meng immediately went to the master to tell him as soon as possible about all the events that had happened to them and to share their impressions and details. They also mentioned Enshin, telling how he single-handedly dealt with the Red Cult clan. The master believed that this was perhaps even for the best, because in this way it was possible to avoid a large number of victims and prevent a greater disaster. However, the master was particularly interested in how Enshin behaved in such a critical situation, what decisions he made, and whether he showed due restraint and wisdom in his actions. However, Bai couldn't remember if it had caused Ensheng any harm, or if he had suffered at all in that tense situation. "A critical situation?" said Meng, trying to imagine what exactly could have happened and how everything actually unfolded. The master believed that if this was truly a bloody cult, then they were led by a strong leader, which was dangerous for a novice in white robes. "Did you really manage everything yourself so as not to put the younger one in danger?" he asked. True, Bai assured them that they had not seen anything, because the lightning genius himself had gone on a reconnaissance mission and had returned with news of the destruction of the bloody cult. But the master couldn't believe what he heard. Did they really mean that Enshin single-handedly defeated them all, crushed everything around him, including the blood demon, armed with a sword? They confirmed all his assumptions, and this plunged the master into even greater shock. He could not understand how Enshin managed to cope with such formidable forces on his own. At that time, Enshin himself was standing by the window, deep in thought, his gaze directed somewhere in the distance, as if he were searching for answers to the questions that tormented him after what he had experienced. "It's nice to be back. I think I've grown attached to this place," Hongwon said with a sigh. Hongwon pointed out that Ensheng probably didn't notice the real excitement in the courtyard. The streets were packed with people, and everyone looked excited, as if a big festival was about to begin, but in reality, that was far from the case. People were immersed in anxiety. It was the former leader of the Divine Sword Squad returning. He came to challenge the position of council chief, intending to change the course of events and achieve his goal, even if it required unforeseen steps. And he also brought with him a boy who, as they say, was adopted into the famous Ifwan Mag family, and they say he has an unusual talent. "Ifwan Maga, this is my mother's clan, my close relatives," Enshin thought to himself. But they never visited Sanyang, not when his mother got married, nor after she gave birth to him and left. And the reason was that for them, his mother's marriage was just an excuse for reproaches. After all, they almost severed ties with their daughter, who married a low-born man. After a while, the teacher called Ensheng, and he came to him without delay. The teacher just stared at Ensheng silently, carefully studying every detail of his appearance and facial expression. The teacher noticed that even Ensheng's aura had changed. It had become heavier and more intense, as if it carried within it the echoes of the battles he had experienced and the accumulated strength that could not be hidden. But he understood that single-handedly destroying an offshoot of a bloody cult could not be a simple success. The teacher looked at Enshin for so long and intently that he began to feel uneasy. He did not understand why this gaze lingered for so long and what exactly the teacher was trying to see or understand. After a long pause, the teacher slowly rose, his movements full of dignity and restrained strength. Standing up, the teacher finally said for Ensheng to follow him, as he had been summoned by the headmaster. These words only increased the tension, and Enshin felt that something extremely important awaited him because he had been summoned by the head of the desert fortress herself. After that, the teacher, without adding a single word, slowly walked towards the door. His steps were confident, and his posture maintained an effortless severity, as if his every movement had meaning. Ensheng silently followed. "And what? Have there been cases when a novice in white clothes was repeatedly summoned to an audience within a year?" Enshin asked. But the teacher abruptly declared that this had never happened before, and his voice was filled with surprise and tension that only emphasized the seriousness of the situation. These harsh words from the teacher tensed Enshin. He felt anxiety begin to build inside, although he tried to maintain a calm appearance. When they entered the yard, the elders gathered around and began to greet Enshin and the teacher. The elders, gathered in small groups, began to lively discuss the events surrounding how Enshin single-handedly defeated the Blood Cult clan. Their voices intertwined, and there was a mixture of surprise and admiration in their conversations. They could not understand how this was possible, and each expressed their own assumptions about the power Enshin possessed. Enshin felt uncomfortable from the numerous looks from his elders, but the teacher noticed his anxiety and reassured him, explaining that this was normal, and it was not at all surprising that he was being paid attention to. After all, he himself had destroyed the responsibility of the Blood Cult, and this meant that he had already become the equal of the masters of the Desert Fortress. His strength and achievements could no longer be ignored. After that, they walked silently to the head, each lost in their own thoughts. The air was heavy with silence, and even the surrounding noise seemed distant as they approached the place where they were to meet the head. Enshin's perception was significantly different from others. He never had time to rejoice in his successes or achievements. For him, it was just another stage on the path. He just wanted to survive, and in that case, he needed to reach the strength of a divine sword squad leader before he turned 20, from white to blue, then to black clothes like Ma Jin, and finally to go through the 17 stages of Ma Guanig and reach the purple rank of leader of the divine sword squad. After a while, they reached the door of the head, the silence that reigned around them becoming increasingly oppressive, and the atmosphere filled with tension. Before they could knock, they heard a conversation outside the door. The voices were clear, but they clearly sounded like they were discussing important matters, and every word seemed important. "Chief, this child is of low blood. He is nothing for their kind," said a male voice from behind the door. One of the voices behind the door said that he would not disgrace Infuan Mag, and that it was already good. These words instantly caught Enshin's attention, and he immediately realized that he was being talked about. The voice believed that the child inside was the true heir. Even though he came from a side branch, his talent was extraordinary, and this was undoubtedly clear to all who watched him. The door creaked open in front of Enshin and the teacher. They silently crossed the threshold and entered. They walked silently, approaching the central part of the room, each of their steps filled with anticipation and tension. In a few minutes they reached the place where the head was sitting. The atmosphere became even more tense, and every movement, every word seemed important in order to understand exactly how events would unfold. The head simply stared at Enshin silently, her gaze calm but attentive. Ensheng didn't understand what her gaze meant, and felt insecure under her attentive gaze. He was lost in his thoughts, and didn't notice that the teacher had already nodded. After the teacher greeted him, Enshin, having recovered a little, also came up and greeted the head along with him. Their words sounded restrained but with respect, because an important figure stood before them. Enshin examined everything that was happening around him, carefully observing every detail, but his gaze stopped on a man standing a little to the side. This man was the former leader of the Divine Sword Squad. His posture and gaze left no doubt about his experience and strength. This man was a purple rank master, surpassing even teacher Ma Jin. His status and strength were recognized by everyone, and he was one of the highest authorities in his environment. The master greeted Enshin, and looking at him with curiosity, asked if he was really the same famous lightning-bearing genius from Ma Guanig. "I am Ma Yongjok, the one who once led the Divine Sword Squad," the man said. And behind him stood his grandson, who wanted to compete with a gifted peer, so I turned to the head. The master was pleased to meet Enshin and expressed interest in his achievements, but Enshin could not believe that he did not recognize him. His expression did not change, but his eyes showed deep interest, and perhaps even an assessment of the situation. The head only silently observed this. Her gaze was calm and penetrating. She did not interfere in the conversation, but her attention was riveted on every movement. every word that sounded between Enshin and the master. The master continued to say that he had heard fresh rumors about Enshin that had once again caught his attention, that these rumors were gaining momentum, and that even among those who knew about him, new speculations about his abilities and achievements were beginning to emerge. Enshin listened attentively. His gaze was clear and focused. He took every word of the master seriously. But having met you in person, he could say that these rumors do not even prove your true abilities. The master spoke haughtily. His voice was calm, but there was a slightly contemptuous note in it. But the master admitted that Enshin was really strong, and even added that his level was incredible for such an age. This admission was not easy, but the obvious could not be denied. Enshin paid his respects with a gesture, bowing his head in recognition of the master. His movement was restrained, but it reflected the seriousness of the situation. "Greetings. I am Jong Enshin from Magwanig," he said, his voice clear and calm, reflecting his confidence. What they heard left everyone speechless. They remained stunned, unable to immediately react to such a bold statement. The air in the room became heavy, and eyes focused on Enshini, everyone present silently appraising him, trying to understand what he really meant by his words. Yeonjok couldn't understand what it meant. His mind was filled with questions, and he tried to figure it out. If his last name was Chon, then it turned out that he was indeed the same person. This discovery immediately changed everything. "This is the first time we've met," Enshin said, his voice calm and confident, but you could also hear some palpable tension in it. The master's eyes widened at what he heard, and he felt cold sweat begin to pour from his forehead. An unexpected alarm signal flashed in his heart. Was Enshin really his sister's son? This thought instantly flashed through the master's mind. It was so unexpected that he couldn't immediately believe it. They exchanged glances, and both were not happy about what they heard. Each of them had uncertainty and confusion in their eyes, because it meant that Ma-jin and Enshin's mother were brother and sister. It turned out that Ma-jin was his own uncle, and this thought really shocked Enshin. He couldn't believe it, because he wasn't familiar with the lineage of his mother's family. But even in the fallen family of the main clan, he was an outcast, which explained why Enshin knew so little about his family. But the fact that the Chon family had fallen shocked everyone. It was a great tragedy, and even the most loyal members of the family had no trace of what was left of their former greatness. "Do you mean to say that the entire Chon family was destroyed?" they all asked in unison. Enshung realized that judging by their reaction, it seemed like they weren't even aware that Chon's family had been wiped out. But no one could understand how this was even possible, how a family that was once at the peak of its power and influence could be destroyed so completely. Yeonjok suddenly turned to ask the lady. He couldn't contain his anxiety and curiosity, and his voice sounded slightly tense as he addressed her. He asked to speak with Enshin alone, seeking an explanation or at least a few clarifications, his gaze serious and at the same time saddened. But before he could hear a response, Enshin strode forward, as if ignoring Yeonjok's request, his decisive step and unwavering confidence indicating that he had other plans. "Excuse me, but it's a stranger to you, isn't it?" Enshin asked. "As a desert fortress warrior, I respect my maternal grandfather's achievements, but any personal conversations were burdensome for him." Yeonjok, upon hearing this, didn't know what to say against it. He felt confused, because he didn't expect such a reaction from Enshin. But suddenly the lady turned to him. Her voice was calm, but there was a certain determination in it. She praised him because his spirit was impressive. Her words were warm but deeply respectful. She noticed his determination and steadfastness, even when others might have felt doubt or fear. But suddenly someone shouted to Enshin that this was unacceptable. The voice was sharp, full of anger and indignation. This was a grandson who couldn't accept how someone like Enshin could be a direct descendant of his grandfather. His indignation was obvious, and he couldn't contain his anger. And in general, it was disrespectful to the previous leader of the Divine Sword Squad. And how does he behave in the presence of the leader of the Desert Fortress? Enshin wondered to himself. But Enshin didn't need his approval. He understood well that this young man's opinion had no bearing on his future path. He drew attention to the sign on his shoulder, which indicated belonging to a clan, and confidently declared that he was not a member of the Ifwanmaga clan. He is completely subordinate to the Ma Guanyin group directly, and this was more important to him than any other connections or assumptions. He looked at his grandson and giggled, which made him very angry. This laughter was not so much a manifestation of contempt as a cold confidence, which caused even more indignation in the young man. Please let me fight this man. I will prove that he is not worthy of being related to us by blood, the young man declared with a hot passion in his voice. But Enshin objected because he believed that this was nonsense. He understood that this fight made no sense, because for him other issues were more important than satisfying the young man's ambitions. He shrugged, looking at the young man, his gaze full of indifference to his challenge. He didn't mind fighting if they wanted to test his skills, however. He didn't have to prove his worth to them or their kind. These words confused Yeonjok. He did not expect such confidence from Enshin. But suddenly Enshin drew attention to his combat gloves. It was a special detail that caught his attention. The combat gloves had a characteristic appearance that indicated training in close combat techniques, typical of Ifwan Mag. But their arguments were abruptly stopped by the mistress. Her calm but authoritative voice resounded in the silence, and all eyes immediately focused on her. She believed that friendship was often forged in battle, and this boy was a promising talent. Her words were calm, but with a touch of respect, which caused a certain numbness among those present. Therefore, the best way to allow their conflict to be resolved, in the mistress's opinion, would be a battle. She looked at them both, her voice even and confident as she added that they could place bets if they wished. But at the same time, she understood that there was little benefit for Enshin in this battle, so out of respect for her old friend, she decided that regardless of the outcome of the battle, she would fulfill any of his requests. These words made Enshin's eyes light up, and he felt a strong surge of energy. This gesture of respect motivated him even more. Enshin asked if she could fulfill the same request regarding the fruit of the heavenly tree. His voice sounded calm, but in his eyes you could see that this question was very important to him. But the lady unfortunately refused, explaining that this was impossible at the moment. Even if her late friend had personally asked, the answer would have been the same. The merits of the leader of the Divine Sword Squad could not be compensated in any other way. But the lady added that she could teach Enshin one of her signature techniques. It was an offer that had immense value, a technique that only the chosen ones possessed, had incredible power, and could help him develop his abilities. No one could believe what they heard. The leader of the desert fortress, called the best under heaven, offers to teach him. The young man was immediately motivated, his eyes lit up with new fire. But Enshin seemed to be more interested in martial arts than defending the honor of his ancestors. He didn't understand if his mother's family had really chosen such a person as their heir. After which Enshin reluctantly agreed. He realized that, despite all his doubts, this opportunity was very important for his development. After some time they arrived at the site. It was a large open space where training and testing of the masters were carried out. They stood facing each other, a silence stretched between them, adding to the atmosphere of tension, both preparing for battle, their gazes never leaving each other. The lady emphasized that no one would interfere with their fight on this site. Her words sounded clear and confident, emphasizing that this fight must be clean and fair. Enshin watched the young man, carefully studying his movements and facial expressions. Enshin noticed the young man preparing his metal fists, carefully observing their weight and structure. It seemed that these fists were not only weapons, but also an element of the young man's combat strategy. The young man confidently began to crunch his hands, as if preparing them for a strike, feeling the metal in his fists clench, and making a peculiar sound that gave him confidence. Enshin's face betrayed displeasure, as if he didn't take all these demonstrations of strength on the young man's part seriously. Enshin noticed the way the masters looked at them. Their gazes were observant and piercing, as if they were assessing their every move. At the moment, he had enough affiliation with Ma Guanying, so he was not at all interested in connecting with the Ifwan Mag clan. After which Enshin, without wasting any words, pointed his hands in the direction of the young man, giving him a sign to attack. His gesture was calm but decisive, as if he was absolutely confident in his abilities and ready for battle. This gesture greatly angered the young man. He took it as contempt, as a sign that Enshin did not take him seriously, and considered him capable only of simple attacks. The young man hit him with all his strength, using his metal fists, trying to deliver a powerful blow that gathered all his rage and frustration, but Enshin, remaining calm and collected, easily repelled his attack. But at the moment Enshin repelled the attack, the young man suddenly jumped back, which surprised Enshin. He took some rare pill. His energy far exceeds mine, Enshin thought to himself. The young man jumping back wasted no time. With passion in his eyes, he began to prepare for a new blow, trying to find a weakness in Enshin's defense. Enshin, seeing that the young man was preparing for a new attack, decided to use his timepiece technique. The young man attacked continuously, his blows becoming faster and more aggressive, each time he tried to break through Enshin's defense. However, Enshin remained calm and reasonable, using his evasion skills. Although the young man's blows were strong and accurate, he seemed unable to overcome Enshin's calmness and speed. Enshin skillfully avoided every attack. His every movement was planned and thought out, his reactions were lightning fast, and his rebounds were precise and balanced. So this is what real family martial arts look like. Despite the seeming softness, these are very sophisticated techniques of a noble school, Enshin thought to himself. The young man, irritated, wondered why Enshin didn't draw his sword, since he clearly had enough opportunities to finish the fight. Enshin calmly replied that it was all because of his technique. These words angered the young man, and his face was distorted with anger. He had long been unable to bear the fact that he had attacked mercilessly, and Enshin himself seemed not to take him seriously. He gathered all his energy, gathering strength in his hands, preparing for a decisive blow that should surprise even someone like Enshin. The young man was incredibly angry. His anger was reaching its peak. He had no patience anymore, and he decided that the next blow would be the last. Enshin remained calm, his gaze unchanging, and even when the young man rushed at him with all his fury, he did not look confused or agitated. Enshin unerringly dodged every attack, as if anticipating the young man's every move. His reactions were instantaneous, and it seemed as if time slowed down for him, allowing him to easily dodge every blow. The young man was on the verge of despair. His every blow met only emptiness, and the feeling that he could not reach Enshin only increased his rage. The masters and mistress watched the fight with great interest, each of them amazed at how easily and gracefully Enshin dodged attacks, his calm and confidence contrasting with the young man's violent despair. "I came up with something to counter it," Enshin said, beginning to concentrate energy in his hands. Enshin looked at the young man with a cold gaze and declared that 10 movements would be enough. Enshin's self-confidence angered the young man even more. He felt his anger reaching its peak, because Enshin's every move seemed so simple to him. Yeonjok was sure that even though Enshin was a genius, he wouldn't be able to win in 10 moves. But Majin explained that he didn't mean that at all, that it would all be over in 10 moves. He meant that he would now create a technique in 10 movements, a new fighting technique. Enshin took a deep breath, focusing his attention completely. After that, Enshin focused his attention on the young man. Seeing all of Enshin's power and skill, the young man felt a surge of anger and determination, so he decided to put in all his effort and give it his all. After that, a powerful energy began to emanate from the young man, which seemed to be bursting from every cell of his body. "I will demonstrate the Hapwa fist technique," the young man confidently declared, filled with determination and strength. However, Enshin was alert for any attacks, and quickly noticed that the young man did not give in to anger. Instead, he was fully focused, directing all his energy into achieving the perfect blow. Moreover, he could feel waves of true energy emanating from him. It couldn't be that the purple master who once ruled the world was teaching him frivolously. Although the guy mentioned fist techniques, Enshin didn't mind at all if palm techniques were involved. Enshin didn't need to list all the techniques. It was clear to him that all that was needed was for the young man to give his all and show his true potential. After that, the young man quickly rushed to attack Enshin, demonstrating lightning speed and determination. However, Enshin instantly turned around, taking a defensive position, and was ready to repel the young man's attack. The next moment, their fists collided, creating a powerful blow that echoed around. The young man was stunned by Enshin's incredible strength, feeling his blow being absorbed without the slightest impact on his opponent. After that, Enshin took a sharp step back and then performed a jump, quickly retreating, ready for another attack. The master, observing Enshin's actions, was amazed by his reaction and skill, not expecting such speed and accuracy. The master believed that their lightning-fast genius had not only not weakened during their travels, but had, on the contrary, become even more perfect, reaching new heights in their skills and craftsmanship. At that moment, Enshin, performing his technique of double chukmagen, struck the young man with incredible force, and he could barely withstand the powerful blow, feeling his whole body shudder in pain. The young man could barely withstand Enshin's onslaught, his body trembling from the force of the blows, and every movement seemed difficult under the pressure of his opponent's skill. But Enshin did not stop, continuing the attack with incredible speed and accuracy, not giving the young man any chance to rest or counterattack. The master, watching what was happening, could not believe his eyes. He was stunned by the level of skill and impeccable technique of Enshin, who seemed invincible. But the master could not believe his eyes, whether Enshin was really so inspired by the Hafwa fist technique he had just seen that he began to use even more effective and fast strikes. And now, with each blow, Enshin became much stronger, his technique became even more perfect, and his attacks became relentless. After that, the young man, sensing the change in Enshin's strength and technique, finally turned his attention to the masters watching the fight. The young man felt the gazes of the masters watching him, and understood that he could not afford to fail in their eyes. Gritting his teeth, he gathered all his will into a fist, determined not to let the masters down and to continue the fight to the last, regardless of the difficulties. This is exactly what Enshin wanted. He wanted the young man to reveal his full potential and demonstrate everything he was capable of. The young man, feeling that the limit of his patience was about to burst, shouted loudly, full of determination not to provoke him. The young man, without wasting time, attacked decisively, using the palm technique. His every movement was quick and precise, like the impact of a wave that leaves no room for escape. Enshin, feeling the pressure, took a step back, avoiding the attack, and instantly responded using a triple chukmajen, which became even more powerful and unexpected than the previous blows. After that, he struck the young man's palms with all his strength. His blow was so strong that it seemed that the entire space around him trembled from his energy. After that, Enshin instantly shifted his attack and using incredible speed hit the young man directly in the shoulder, making him feel the full force of this blow. The young man winced in pain. His shoulder felt the full force of the blow, and for a moment he lost concentration and became confused. But Enshin remained completely focused, his gaze cold and determined, his every move deliberate. After that, Enshin began to concentrate his energy in his hand, feeling it gradually gain power. Enshin believed that palm techniques could indeed be interesting and effective in this fight, and he was ready to test its capabilities in practice, applying his own energy and skill. The masters watched this incredible battle intently, their every gaze focused on every movement, and they held their breath, realizing that they had witnessed something truly great. Enshin did not stop, continuing the attack with incredible speed and accuracy, and the young man, trying to dodge, moved to the sides. After that, Enshin impressively hit the young man with a fourth chukmajin. Everyone was shocked by this turn of events, as the fight had reached incredible intensity, but the mistress, watching this, could not hide her pleasure. It was the final blow. The young man, exhausted, fell to his knees, unable to continue the fight. The young man leaned back, breathing heavily, but gathering all his strength, he raised his eyes, full of determination and dignity, and met Enshin's gaze. Enshin stood over him, calmly and mercilessly gazing at the young man, without saying a word. His gaze was penetrating, as if he was assessing every aspect of his struggle, every move that had led to this moment. There was a silence on the field that seemed heavy and indescribable. Everyone present held their breath, watching this climax of the fight, when every movement, every look seemed important and decisive. The longer the combination, the stronger the energy of the fist became, as if each blow accumulated power that grew with each subsequent movement, reaching an incredible force capable of breaking through any defense. It was amazing how he was able to create a new martial art in such a short time, combining speed, strength, and technique into a single unbeatable system. His ability to adapt and develop new strategies was impressive, proving that a true master is not limited to tradition, but creates something completely new. But Enshin felt great joy and pride because he was able to create a worthy martial art that not only tested the limits of physical capabilities, but also showed a new approach to combat. "I witnessed an amazing spectacle," the lady said, her voice full of admiration and recognition. Seeing how a martial art is created is something truly incredible. Enshin apologized, wondering if he had disappointed the lady, but she appeared and, watching him, only smiled, making it clear that he had exceeded even expectations. Watching him, she wondered if he already knew what to call this new technique, because she understood that this moment could be the beginning of something truly significant in martial arts. "I named her Unfading Radiance," he said, his voice full of confidence. The mistress smiled, understanding the depth and beauty of Enshin's choice, a fighting style that continuously radiated radiance, symbolizing not only physical strength, but also inner energy that did not fade, but constantly developed. She believed that this was a very appropriate name. It truly reflected the essence of the technique, a continuous emission of energy and power that does not fade and even becomes stronger over time. The master praised Enshin, recognizing that he had done a tremendous job creating a new martial art, and he highly appreciated his ability to combine technique and creativity, which allowed for the birth of something unique and powerful. But Enshin believed that he had only laid the foundations. He understood that there was still a long way to go in improving and developing this technique, and that true art required constant work and self-improvement. He has so far used it in the traditional Manhwa style, retaining the classical elements and techniques that were the foundation of his skill. The master believed that even if Enshin was now using the traditional Manhwa style technique, few among the white rank representatives would be able to withstand such a blow. The master tried not to be surprised, but the speed of Enshin's progress left him no chance not to be impressed. With each fight, with each new technique, he became stronger and more unpredictable, surpassing even the best expectations. But Enshin said he needed to get even faster. He understood that even his current level of skill would not be enough. Everyone was shocked by what they heard. They could not believe that even after such impressive achievements, Enshin sought to improve himself even more, setting such ambitious goals for himself. Yongjok sadly turned and looked at Enshin, his gaze full of understanding and slight pity. Yongjok, still watching Enshin, wondered how he could deserve forgiveness, a deep concern evident in him. The master and the young man were shocked by what they heard. Yongjok's question surprised them both, because they did not expect such a turn in the conversation. Enshin stood silently and looked at Yongjok, his gaze deep and thoughtful. Yongjok was the last leader of the Divine Sword Desert Sword Detachment, and his authority was unbreakable. He was considered a celestial deity who had power over the life and death of most people. Legends about his power and wisdom circulated among all who were familiar with his name. Enshin couldn't understand how someone like Yongjok could bow his head to him. Enshin apologized, but at this point the gesture on his part was extremely burdensome. You can't just fix the mistakes of the past, and for Enshin, his maternal relatives were no different from strangers. Now he had the Manhwa family, and the past mattered little to him. He did not seek answers in what had been, nor did he seek to change what had already happened. But Yongjok believed that connections could always be built again, even if they were lost or weakened. But Enshin refused because he was too absorbed in his training. Yongjok did not expect such an answer. His view of Enshin changed. Enshin continued that he had defeated his grandson in a duel that he had organized himself. So he asked to respect his aspirations as a warrior. Enshin emphasized that his choice to follow his own path was not a whim, but a necessity, because only in this way could he become who he aspired to be. Since the lightning genius had won, the lady interrupted their conversation. She promised to teach him one of her techniques after the battle, so she told him to come at any convenient time. Besides, he might need one more thing from the desert fortress, something that could help him not only in battle, but also in understanding himself. But Enshin stated that he would communicate about a convenient time through the master as soon as it came. He was sure that the time for training had not yet come, and for now his path required concentration on training and overcoming his own limitations. The master was surprised, because he really considered him a personal ambassador. After that, they walked down the stairs together in silence, only the sounds of their footsteps breaking the silence, and the atmosphere was saturated with thoughts that each of them was trying to comprehend. But suddenly the master turned to him. His voice sounded calm, but deep wisdom was felt in it. He told him that he had a task that would help him achieve his goal. This task would not be easy, but it was through it that Enshin would be able to get closer to his goal and test himself on a new level. Enshin became interested, his gaze became more focused, and he felt that this task could be an important step towards his goal. The next day they went to the city of Xi'an. There were many people. Buyers and sellers were preparing to sell. The streets of Xi'an were bustling with life, and every step resounded amidst the noise of the bazaars and the shouts of the merchants. But in this noise, Enshin and the last ones walked. They moved calmly among the crowd. Their steps seemed almost invisible against the background of all this chaos of life. They looked around, taking in the vendors bustling about, the colorful fabrics fluttering in the wind, and the many vistas that opened up before them. Yes, Enshin was lost in his thoughts, and his gaze involuntarily wandered over the surrounding chaos, but he remembered the conversation with the master. The master mentioned Jasodan, and the word aroused Enshin's immediate interest. Joseton is a rare pill of the Huastan sect, which is considered a treasure of the martial arts world, and the sect lost it, and since then, many other sects and martial arts masters have been searching for this treasure. Their mission is to accompany the Huasan sect in their search for the Joseton pill. In words, it's just a joint search, but in reality it's a necessity so as not to waste life in vain. Since there will be many skirmishes during the mission, I will have the opportunity to test my sword in real combat, Enshin said. Smiling and sighing, the master agreed with his words. He also believed that this mission would certainly prove useful to him, and he would be able to freely fight numerous masters. Given his innate talent, he believed that Enshin would achieve greater success than if he continued with conventional training. But suddenly, Enshin was pulled out of his thoughts by Hongwon, who felt offended and approached Enshin with a clearly displeased expression that reflected his feelings of resentment. Because the desert fortress cannot open to support the Huasan sect, they cannot wear the usual battle robes. Hearing his words, the master smiled. They approached the building where they were to meet with the Huasan clan. When suddenly the people from the Huasan clan came out and the masters met their eyes, there was something special in the eyes of each of them, respect, but also tension at the same time. They were glad that the masters from the desert fortress had finally arrived. They had been expecting them for a long time. The masters began to examine the people of the Huasan clan, carefully studying each of them. Zhongju Jinying welcomed Ma Guaneg on his arrival. His words sounded respectful, but there was a certain disgust and arrogance in his gaze. Ma Guaneg, in turn, felt a similar attitude towards himself from Zhongju Jinying. The same disgust and high assessment of his own importance could be read in his gaze. At that time, Enshin tensed. He could feel the tension between Zhongju Jinying and Ma Guaneg filling the space. Cheongju Jin's leader of the Plum Blossom Sword Masters and an unsurpassed Grandmaster, his reputation was impeccable, and even among the best, he was considered a symbol of strength and wisdom. Even wearing black clothes, Ma Jinying is not as good as Zhongju Jinying, but the impression they both give is quite similar. Zhongju Jinying addressed the two masters, calling them by their nicknames. Bai's was Sword of Ilion, and Meng's was Blue-Eyed Demon. All the faces were familiar to him, so there was no point in exchanging pleasantries. The past fight had put everything in its place without words. Enshin was surprised by such nicknames and could not understand where they came from, why Sword of Ilion and Blue-Eyed Demon. But suddenly Enshin drew attention to the boy among them. He looked as if he didn't care, as if nothing bothered him in this environment. But suddenly, he was brought back from his thoughts by Zhongju, who said that although the desert fortress's attitude towards the matter left much to be desired, they had gathered here for a specific purpose. Looking at Enshin, Zhongju decided that he was the green disciple who had been taken on a mission. A slight surprise could be seen in his gaze, as well as a certain dubious attitude towards his presence among masters like them. Enshin couldn't believe that he was accepted as a student of the desert fortress despite not wearing formal white robes. When Majin tried to explain his point of view, Zhongju interrupted him, abruptly drawing his sword. But even a disciple of the desert fortress finds it difficult, Zhongju suggested, looking at Enshin with a cold gaze. Zhongju, noticing the tension and wanting to divert attention from serious conversations, suggested that their students exchange blows. Majin smiled. Sensing the insidious implication in Zhongju's words, he realized that he wanted to test his student, test his strength and skills. Since it is not appropriate for the leaders of the groups to fight in a joint mission, he decided to fight back through the youth, who determine future relationships. Majin calmly looked at Enshin, and the latter, having gathered all his thoughts, immediately understood from his look that it was time to prepare for battle. When suddenly a confident voice broke the silence, saying, "They decided to tease his teacher again." It was a comment that lightened the atmosphere a bit. And this voice continued with slight sarcasm whether 5 seconds would be enough, a question intended to emphasize that these fights had become habitual for him. Zhongju seemed to be sure that this battle would be an important indicator, so he turned to him, saying to fight with all his might, with all his strength. The guy who was observing the situation was sure that Enshin would be able to show him something. He had heard that the martial art of Ma Guaneg was based on sensory perception directly in battle, which meant that the masters were able to listen, feel, and observe the movements of the enemy on an intuitive level. Enshin was curious about what the disciples of the Huasan sect were like. He had heard about their reputation, their unusual fighting techniques, their swordsmanship, and their unique principles they followed in their training. "Do you think 5 seconds will be enough?" Enshin asked, looking at his opponent. The guy didn't want to offend him, but there was still a hint of arrogance in his voice. He tried to remain neutral, but he couldn't hide a certain contempt. He apologized, explaining that it was just that during morning training sessions, there was always a mood that allowed for frankness and a certain harshness in words. He greeted, giving his name Yu Hyun of the Hwasan sect, his voice sounding calm and even a little proud for someone who was part of such a grand clan. Yu Hyun, the hidden dragon of Hwasan, they say he is a prominent disciple, the leader of the Hwasan sect, Hongwan said anxiously, looking at him with some uncertainty. He was nicknamed the hope of the sect's next generation, and it is rumored that he has already begun to master the divine art of the purple mist. To pit such a monster against their monster, Enshin was extremely interesting. The conclusions of the battle between them could change a lot in the understanding of martial arts. Enshin, with his unique style and incredible speed, was a formidable force in his own right, and the confrontation with such an outstanding student as Yu Hyun only deepened the interest in who would be stronger. It would be a battle of two titans, where every move and every strategy could decide the outcome. They were incredibly strong, each of them possessing unique skills that made them virtually invincible in combat. Enshin prepared for the fight. Focusing on every movement, his arms began to move smoothly, performing a series of warm-ups to warm up his muscles and prepare his body for the fight. After the warm-up, Enshin greeted and introduced himself, his voice sounding calm and confident, expressing readiness for battle. They stood facing each other, and although Yu Hyun smiled self-confidently, Enshin remained calm and unwavering. Before Yu Hyun could get his sword out, he rushed forward with all his might and attacked him sharply. Suddenly Enshin was attacked, as if by countless blows at once, a wave of energy tearing through space, like blows striking from all sides. Enshin instantly realized that in front of him was a palm technique known as falling petals, a technique that combined high variability and accuracy, creating powerful blows that were invisible to the eye with each movement. Enshin parried every blow with incredible ease, his movements becoming smooth and precise. Yu Hyun, gathering all his strength and energy, struck again, this time using an improved version of his technique, Unfading Radiance, the first spiral technique. This technique surprised Enshin because Yu Hyun was able to adapt his technique to the situation so quickly and accurately that even an experienced fighter like him could not help but feel respect for this skill. Enshin, surprised by the new technique, could not help but ask what kind of technique it was. Enshin could not hide his admiration. His eyes widened as he realized the depth of Yu Heng's technique. It was a technique that combined not only strength, but also a deep understanding of energy and body movements. Enshin stamped his foot sharply on the ground, feeling energy surge through his body. Enshin used the second wall technique. The ground under his feet began to rise, creating a powerful protective barrier. After Enshin solidified his position, he wasted no time in attacking Yu Heng with all his strength. The earth barrier he had created disappeared, and his energy gathered into one powerful blow. A wave of energy similar to the one Yu Hyun had attacked with earlier began to form around him. It wasn't just moving, but was powerful, like a storm rapidly developing. The palm technique of falling petals of the Hwasan sect. This is enough to inspire Enshin to the third technique of blinking. Enshin, understanding the seriousness of the situation, couldn't help but smile when he remembered Yu Hyun's words about 5 seconds. He decided to turn it against his opponent. Yu Hyun felt Enshin's words sink into his mind and heart, the mocking tone in his opponent's voice adding even more pressure to him. Enshin, feeling his energy build up, became ready for another powerful blow. The masters were watching the fight closely, and each of them felt a huge tension in the air, but Ma Jin, as an experienced mentor, watched the fight with cold calm because he was confident in his student. Enshin, gaining speed, continued to attack with incredible precision and energy. His movements became even more refined and elusive, each blow seemed more powerful than the previous one, and his technique increasingly resembled a symphony of combat. His every step was carefully calculated, and even the smallest movement seemed to have immense significance. Yu Hyun, despite his incredible technique and agility, began to noticeably tire. Yu Hyun, unable to cope with the constant attacks, lost his balance during the final blow. The master of the Hwasan sect, Jeongju Jinyin, could not believe what he was seeing. He stood there, not taking his eyes off his student, Yu Hyun, lying on the ground, unable to get up after his duel with Enshin. At that time, Yu Hyun lay on the ground, still in shock from what had happened, his body feeling heavy and his mind unable to comprehend how quickly and painfully he had been defeated. At the same time, Enshin was happy because this attack was just a new third move and decided to call it Unfading Radiance Palm Bud. But suddenly, Yu-hyun noticed the looks around. Everyone started discussing what had just happened. Whispers and whispering filled the air, and the people gathered around couldn't believe what had just happened on the field. To defeat such a talent as Yu-hyun in 3 attacks amazed everyone. No one could believe that this guy, seemingly an ordinary student, was capable of displaying such incredible skill. After Yu-hyun fell to the ground, the Hwasan sect master, who was watching the fight, gave the order to immediately go over to him and lift him off the field. After the master's order, several disciples from the Hwasan clan quickly approached Yu-hyun, who was lying on the ground, and began to lift him onto their shoulders and carry him away. "It seems like a dragon has been raised in a desert fortress. Your grip on the world of martial arts is becoming even tighter," Jinin said finally. Ma Jin, observing the situation, smiled slightly, and addressing him, remarked not to overestimate them. Ma Jin emphasized the importance of upholding moral principles, even in battle. He emphasized that the desert fortress would not harm the innocent. Jinny believed that this position was only an excuse to avoid serious fighting or responding to real threats. Jin, watching Enshin, asked his name again, realizing that his strength and technique were extraordinary. Jinny noted that Enshin demonstrated impressive martial arts that were admired. It was somewhat similar to the falling petals technique, but I don't think anyone could have taught him Hwasa's techniques. He had no idea that similar techniques existed. Jinny hoped that this duel would be a boost for all students, even those who usually don't put in the effort. If the day comes when circumstances force him to leave the desert fortress, Hwasan will welcome him as an honored guest. Hongwon, Myung, and Ma Jin were instantly alerted by these words. Ma Jin shouted that he was already crossing the line. His face became serious and even a little angry. Master Jinin apologized, his gaze softening. Master Jinin admitted his mistake, remembering that sometimes greed can cloud the mind and that he had gone too far with his behavior. Master Jinyin could not contain his emotions as a young warrior stood before him, possessing such brilliant talent that he had rarely seen. This aroused in him both admiration and an incredible desire to test this potential, although he understood that such an approach could be unfriendly and not entirely correct. Enshin was lost in thought. Feeling his body slowly regain energy after the last heavy blow, he knew he had almost used up everything he had on that last move. Unfading radiance expends maximum strength on each movement, but the amount of internal energy consumed is too great, so for now, in real combat, it is better to rely on the sword. After a while, they were already at the hotel, where the masters and students were able to rest a bit after the difficult duel. Enshin, Hongwon, and Bai discussed the battle, and Meng stated that Enshin needed to open his Zhongdan meridian as soon as possible. And if internal energy is not enough for such powerful attacks, you will need to pay attention to developing endurance. Increased stamina would allow him to withstand more blows and continue fighting even after his energy begins to deplete. Enshin didn't quite understand what they were talking about, as his attention was focused only on his own thoughts and training. They began to explain that even though the Shandan meridian, which is responsible for spiritual energy in the head, does not provide such an advantage, it will strengthen his internal energy. Enshin listened carefully, trying to understand what exactly they were trying to convey to him. He understood that even if his technique was impressive, he lacked certain aspects, such as stamina and inner energy. They continued that efficiency would also increase, and asked if he knew about the legend of masters who fought tirelessly for 7 days and nights. They all trained the Zhongdan meridian, and the flow of their internal energy became stable, allowing for multiple uses of powerful techniques. Even after a powerful release, the flow of energy is not interrupted. Enshin continued to listen attentively, thoughtfully analyzing every word. He realized that these qualities help not only to withstand blows, but also to find opportunities for counterattacks. Enshin, listening carefully to the explanations, focused on the details, and wondered how to open this Zhongdan meridian. Tabai explained that if he trained this Yadan meridian for a long time, it would open on its own. He just needed to meet the energy circulation in the upper body. Enshin listened attentively to the explanation, but his desire for improvement forced him to ask an unexpected question. He asked if there was a faster way to open the Zhongdan meridian, addressing Bai as his elder sister. Bai stopped slightly when she heard Enshin address her as an older sister, her eyebrows rising slightly in surprise. Bai smiled unexpectedly, and this smile was soft and warm, although a little reserved. Her eyes lit up for a moment with a sincerity that no one usually saw in her stern appearance. Enshin gave her a brief, surprised look. He couldn't understand why Bai suddenly smiled, and what exactly caused such a reaction. Her behavior seemed strange to him, because usually she remained reserved and serious. After some time, they gathered in one of the cafes and loudly discussed their plans, attracting the attention of other visitors with their exclamations. "Tugai, you say?" Bai exclaimed anxiously. The master confirmed her words. Tugui was indeed the culprit. He was a notorious thief who brought fear to the northern regions of the Yangtze. And this is the man who gained infamy not only for his crimes, but also for stealing the legendary secret martial arts whistle, considered the most valuable artifact. "Did they steal our artifact?" Hongwan asked in surprise, his eyes wide open. "Unfortunately, it turned out that way," Bai confirmed through gritted teeth, barely holding back her irritation. From that moment on, they decided to eradicate all signs and symbols in Shanxi that were associated with sects that had any connection with Tugui. While they make noise and make the sect members tremble, the Huashan will focus on gathering information from within the sects themselves to learn more about Tugai's plans. Enshin wondered if they should destroy the signs of the fighting sects, as it could attract unnecessary attention and harm their plans. It seemed to me that he did not understand the robber sects well, because these people organize extortion under the guise of protection, without even thinking about gaining the approval of the imperial family. From the empire's perspective, the difference between righteous sects and robber sects is simple. Christians are sacrificed to the former voluntarily, while the latter are robbed at gunpoint. But even if they are killed, new groups of parasites will appear, so most often they turn a blind eye to this, and there is no particular reason needed to deal with them. They had 5 sects in their sights, and the master decided to take responsibility for 2 of them in order to focus his forces on the most dangerous ones. Enshin expressed his desire to go alone, believing that this would be the best option to complete the mission quietly and without unnecessary noise. But the master thought it was too risky, and insisted that he not go alone, as one mistake could lead to undesirable consequences. But Enshin insisted that he would cope on his own, confident in his abilities and experience, which would allow him to avoid danger. The master explained that fighting alone against cultists is a completely different level of skill. When you're attacked by a whole group, there are too many variables to consider. This cannot be compared to a one-on-one duel, where everything is more predictable. After that, knocking on the table, the master resolutely said that right here and now, they would distribute tasks in order to act clearly and coherently. The target is the Enshin Tanglan sect, located in Yanhe County near Xi'an. As far as he knew, they were the real scum of society. They said they wouldn't stop even at kidnapping women, using any methods to achieve their goals. The task was clear: the complete destruction of the sect, to wipe them off the face of the earth, and to return, leaving no one alive, to destroy their influence once and for all. That same day, Enshin set out on a mission, ready to complete it without hesitation, focused and determined. He was heading to the place with his guide, who was supposed to know the area well and help avoid the traps set by the sectarians. He looked at Enshin with anxiety, knowing how dangerous this task could be, and worried for his safety. "Are you really going there alone?" he asked him, not hiding his concern. He tried to persuade him to reconsider his decision, emphasizing that the Thanlin sect was not just a group, but a dangerous and cruel people capable of anything, and he was risking too much by going there alone. They were trained in martial arts, and even one of them could paralyze movement on the streets of Yanhe, leaving their enemies without a chance. But as if not hearing what he was saying, Enshin asked to tell him more about the Tanglan sect, wanting to learn as much as possible before setting off on a mission. He began to tell how the Tanglan sect had settled in Yanhe 3 years ago, gradually taking over the streets and terrorizing the locals, using their martial arts to control the territory. Their crimes have long been known, but it seems they bribed a local official, which allowed them to avoid punishment and operate without restrictions. He also heard that they use various types of weapons, from cold steel to firearms, to strengthen their control and intimidate local residents. He also saw their battles from afar several times, impressed by their skill and the ferocity with which they attacked their enemies. They were also so fast that it was difficult to follow them with the eye, and with one blow of their sword, they could decapitate 2 people at once. And the magistrates seemed to be in cahoots with the Thanlin sect, so there was no one to help. The authorities were effectively covering up their crimes, giving them the freedom to act with impunity. These words angered Enshin. He felt anger burning inside him because the corrupt authorities only made it more difficult to fight these criminals. After a while, they reached Yanhei County, where the atmosphere was tense and the presence of the Tanglan sect could be felt at every turn. After some time, Enshin and the guide approached a place where a crowd was shouting loudly, clearly gathered because of some conflict or event that had attracted the attention of the locals. Before them stood the men from Thanlan, who had tied up the local girls, clearly preparing them for something that did not bode well. The girls cried, their tears mixed with despair, because they understood that they had fallen into the hands of ruthless people, and there was no hope of rescue in sight. Enshin watched this with disgust, each cry from the girls making him even more angry, for he knew that this was just part of the ruthless game of the Tanlan sect. He spoke to them with a cold tinge of contempt. They had earned their reputation by looking at their cruel deeds, which left no doubt as to how deserving of hatred they were. And he wanted to clarify that they were indeed acting with the permission of the magistrate, because this explained their impunity and the sense of unlimited power they possessed. These bound people were indeed criminals, but their guilt could not justify the cruelty and violence perpetrated by their captors. One of them threw a knife at Enshin with a smile, attacking him with clear intent. But Enshin easily deflected the knife and seizing the moment caught it, giving him no chance to attack again. Then, without hesitation, he threw it back, Ma Guagel's swift blade, precisely aimed, like a deadly blow rushing towards its target. The sword flew straight into his head, splitting the air with incredible speed, and his body instantly fell, lifeless, to the ground. Everyone looked at this in surprise and became wary, realizing that the situation was out of control and Enshin was not going to stop. They realized that Enshin was no ordinary man, and that he could be much more dangerous than they initially imagined. After all, his stance with the dagger was strange, and they began to doubt whether he had trained correctly, because the movements were so skillful and unpredictable that it could not have been a coincidence. And so fast they wondered if the martial art he had just demonstrated was real, as his technique and speed were unlike any of the famous schools they had encountered. But Enshin stated that it was simply a mixture of techniques combined for specific situations in order to be able to quickly adapt and defeat any opponent. One of the sect's people said that his sword was good-natured, and that if he presented it to the sect leader. Before he could finish, Enshin sharply struck him across the face with his sword, instantly cutting off his words and leaving him with only pain and the understanding that his fate had already been decided. This sent blood splatter in different directions, staining the ground and air, and those around felt the full brutality of the blow. The other people from the sect were amazed by what they saw, unable to take their eyes off Enshin, feeling that they had witnessed something extraordinary, of such speed and ruthlessness that it was difficult to predict. Without wasting a moment, Enshin struck them all down with a single blow with Ma Guagel's swift blade, precise and deadly, giving no chance for defense. Blood began to splash from them, spilling onto the ground, creating a bloody scene that signaled the end of the battle and the final resolution of this conflict. Bodies began to fall to the ground like dead trees broken by a blow, and blood spread around them, covering the ground. The guide and the locals opened their mouths and eyes wide in surprise. Not believing what had just happened, they were stunned by the speed and efficiency of Enshin, who effortlessly destroyed all the enemies. The girls also couldn't say a word. Their eyes were filled with shock and fear, and there was complete silence around, as if time had stopped for a few seconds after everything happened. But in a second, they all started screaming loudly and ran to their mistresses, grabbing their hands as if trying to find support and protection from them after what had happened. After that, they began to thank Enshin for their salvation, bowing their heads in gratitude, but also with a sense of fear at what they had just experienced. The guide could not say a word. He was too shocked by what had happened and could not comprehend the cruelty and speed of Enshin's actions. With a cold gaze, Enshin asked where the Tanglan sect was located. His voice was calm, but there was an unwavering determination in it. But the guide was still in shock. He sighed heavily, trying to gather his thoughts before answering, because it was difficult for him to recover from what he had seen. After which he pointed to the building nearby silently, as if words were unnecessary and everything was already clear. This building was to their left, a large structure that appeared well preserved, though its exterior hid the dark affairs going on inside, related to the Thanlan sect. Enshin walked silently along a straight path towards the building, paying no attention to his surroundings, his gaze focused only on his goal. He approached this building, approaching its walls, feeling their cold hardness and heaviness, as if the walls themselves hid all the secrets of the Thanlin sect. After which he swung his foot to kick the door, preparing to break through it with his strength and determination. He kicked open the door with a loud bang that echoed throughout the building, and it slid open, leaving only darkness before him. The explosion created a loud fog that filled the space around the door, obscuring visibility and adding even more tension to the atmosphere. There were many people from the sect standing in front of Enshin. Their gazes were full of disdain and challenge. They clearly did not expect such a quick attack and were ready for battle when they saw his entrance. But Enshin was not at all bothered by their looks. He remained calm and collected. His gaze was firm, ready to break their power. He was surrounded by many warriors, but in front of him stood a man, tall and confident, with an expression that betrayed his leadership position in the sect. And he asked if he had beaten their students, with undisguised curiosity, as if it were just one of the minor troubles he had encountered before. But Enshin was only disgusted by it, because his question was so audacious that it only strengthened his desire to punish everyone who stood in his way. But what infuriated him most was that this man even dared to wear clothes with dragons on them that only emperors could wear, which was an expression not only of a lack of respect, but also of a desperate desire to humiliate the symbols of power. When the students wanted to attack Enshin, he stopped them with a gesture, because it had been a long time since he had felt the taste of a sword fight. His eyes lit up with impatience, because he was ready to face a worthy opponent and test his skills in a duel. The man thought Enshin was just playing hero and couldn't understand how he dared to appear before their sect at all, considering it a challenge and a display of insolence that needed to be punished. Enshin asked what his name was, but the man saw no reason to answer, believing that Enshin would die from his sword, and it would all be over quickly, leaving no room for any important words or explanations. But Enshin had a different opinion, because you always need to know who you are dealing with, so that later, after victory, you can declare your superiority and achievement. Smiling, the man charged at him sharply, full of confidence in his strength, his sword instantly reaching towards Enshin, ready to strike. Enshin watched him closely and admitted that he was indeed fast. His strikes were precise and instantaneous, but this only made Enshin want to show even more skill and find weaknesses in his defense. Enshin suddenly began to see the trajectory of the sword, his movements becoming clear and precise. As if everything had slowed down, he thought this was possible due to his growing strength and skill, which allowed him to perceive the fight on another level. Then, with all his strength, Enshin struck him, deflecting the attack with lightning speed. The impact was so powerful that the man flew backward, losing his balance and having to step back for a moment to collect himself. The man, pushing himself away from the blow, wondered what kind of strength Enshin had, surprised by how easily he repelled his attack, and his gaze became more attentive and wary. But Enshin did not answer his question. He remained calm and focused, while his gaze spoke more than any words. His goal was simple victory, and he had no time for empty talk. But the other warriors were preparing to attack, surrounding Enshin on all sides. They were ready to accept the battle, but seeing his calmness, they began to doubt whether they would be able to cope with such an opponent. But still, unable to withstand the tension, they dared to attack him. They simultaneously attacked from different sides, trying to surround and take advantage of the numerical advantage. But Enshin was not at all afraid. He stood, ready for battle, and with each movement his confidence only grew. He was completely focused, ready to repel every blow and take advantage of their mistakes. He concentrated, watching their movements, studying their every gesture and pose, his mind working like a machine, processing information at maximum speed, looking for weaknesses in their attack. He skillfully dodged all attacks. His movements were precise and flawless, as if he anticipated every move of his opponents. His speed and reaction left no room for error, and every attack deflected, leaving him unharmed. On the contrary, he not only successfully dodged attacks, but also managed to respond to each of the attackers. His strikes were lightning fast and accurate. Every move was inextricably linked to a counterattack, and he calmly controlled the situation as if he were directing the battle on his own terms. His attacks were barely noticeable to the human eye, so fast and elusive that opponents didn't even have time to understand where the blow came from. Blood was splattered everywhere, and the bodies of those who could not withstand Enshin's onslaught remained on the ground. His movements were so ruthless and precise that they didn't even leave time for resistance. The air was filled with a sense of inevitability and death, and his opponents could do nothing to stop this flow. He saw absolutely everyone, his gaze was piercing, and he closely followed every movement of his enemies. Anyone who tried to get close to him was instantly assessed, and he could predict where they would go wrong, allowing him to act with maximum efficiency. He saw every attack as if time had slowed down for him. Every movement, every gesture of the enemies was clearly visible. He could unerringly determine when and how to dodge or counterattack. His reaction was almost instinctive, as each blow was the result of an accurate assessment of the situation. And he overcame them with ease, as if it were not a battle but a game. Every attack was repelled, every blow turned into an opportunity for a counterattack. But Enshin abruptly jumped away from this crowd, freeing up space for maneuver. His movements were graceful but quick. He was instantly out of reach of their attacks and ready to strike again. And his next target was the man who was in charge of everyone. Enshin assessed the situation again, and now, gathering himself, he moved straight towards him as if everything around him had gone silent. There was cold determination in his gaze, and fear in the man's. He felt the situation change dramatically, and all his confidence and strength began to melt when he saw Enshin approaching. The entire crowd of enemies, which had seemed like a threat just a moment ago, suddenly scattered, and in its place was only dead silence. The man was in fear from what he saw. His eyes opened wide, and his heart began to beat faster. All his prepared words got stuck in his throat when he realized that there was no chance anymore. Enshin sighed heavily, concentrating all his energy into one powerful impulse. He could feel the power coursing through his body, and at that moment his concentration was absolute. In a group battle, you simply need to assert your superiority, show your enemies that they have no chance, and that their every move is pointless. Enshin began to imagine that the hand gripping the sword was a fist. This allowed him to focus even more on his strength, turning the weapon into an extension of his will. Next, he concentrated the power in his legs, forming the second stage of separation. His legs became an important source of power. He felt the energy flowing to them and helping to develop incredible speed and accuracy. Then the energy spread throughout his body, encompassing every muscle and joint, his entire being concentrated in one powerful impulse, and with a determination that left no room for doubt, he took a sharp leap forward. Enshin, gathering all his strength and determination, attacked the man. His movements were quick and precise, each blow was thought out, and energy was embodied in his every step. Then he swung, gathering all his energy into one powerful movement, the sword in his hand almost glowing with the force he was directing at his opponent. The man, not having time to react, had no chance. Enshin turned out to be like a storm that quickly absorbed everything in its path, leaving behind only the shadow of his relentless power. Then, using all his mighty strength, Enshin struck him. The blow was incredibly fast and precise, like thunder that struck with its echo. The sword cut through the air with astonishing force, and the blow hit exactly on target. The man could not dodge it or withstand it. All that remained was complete submission at once. The man was pierced in two, and before he could even lower his sword, his body disintegrated from the immense force of the blow. But in a moment he was lying on the ground unconscious, the man's body torn into two parts, and only blood continued to flow. But everyone just stared at him in silence, stunned by what had happened. They couldn't utter a single word. Standing before them was a man whose skills and strength surpassed all their imaginations. Enshin declared that today he would destroy the signboard of the Tanglan sect, and his voice sounded firm, like an order. His gaze was serious, cold as ice. Every word that came out of his mouth was imbued with confidence, as if he had already decided the fate of everyone who remained. They all swore, not understanding what was happening. None of them could believe that there was a person standing before them who could destroy an entire sect in an instant. But suddenly they all began to shout loudly to call the Bloodmaster, each of them hoping that the Bloodmaster would be able to turn the tide of the battle and understand that such a defeat could not be allowed. "You are talking about the blood demon with the sword? Is the Blood Tribe sect behind your actions?" he said coldly, his gaze piercing everyone who stood before him. The students stood motionless, their eyes fixed on Enshin, their faces reflecting a mixture of fear, respect, and confusion, no one daring to make an unnecessary movement or utter a word. Enshin rushed forward with lightning speed and grabbed one of the students by the throat. He didn't even have time to react. His hands reflexively clenched on Enshin's wrist, but the resistance was not enough. The pain and lack of air weakened the student, and his legs buckled. He fell to his knees, gasping for air, trying to inhale at least a little air, while Enshin's hand still held his throat. Seized with panic fear for his life, the student whispered with a trembling voice and wide-open eyes that the bloody demon that terrorized everyone was hiding and now sleeping in the dark and sinister annex. Enshin was convinced that a bloody demon with a shining sword in his hands was really standing before him, because such a terrifying battle, filled with fury and power, was impossible not to feel even from a distance. The sword, as if from hell itself, flashed through the air with lightning speed, leaving no time for reflection. A blade flew in its direction, literally cutting through the air, leaving a whistling sound in its wake. Enshin reacted instantly, gathering all his strength in his hand. He deflected the sword with such a blow that it flew to the side, and with all its power, it sank into the ground, creating a deep crack. After that, he directed his gaze at the silhouette that had rapidly risen into the air, attempting to attack from above. But suddenly his course changed abruptly, and he leapt forward, trying to get around Enshin on the other side to launch a surprise attack from a new position. After which Enshin stood up, ignoring the swift attack, and quickly rising, pulled his sword from the ground, ready for a new battle. "I never imagined you could repel my blow so easily. You're a real master, little one," he said, carefully watching Enshin's movements. Enshin became alert, his eyes sharply sharpened on the enemy. He carefully examined every movement, every gesture of his opponent, because he understood that this battle could change at any moment. Before him stood a bloody demon with a sword, his gaze cold and calculating, and the sword in his hands gleamed, ready for battle. Suddenly, Enshin remembered a conversation with the master, in which he had already expressed a desire to receive blue clothes. The master was pleased with Enshin's persistence, because he saw in him determination and a desire to achieve his goal, despite the difficulties. After that, he began to voice the conditions for this. His voice became clear and authoritative. Each word was pronounced with deliberation, as if each moment was important for the further development of events. "Kill 5 bloody demons, then we'll talk," said the master. After all, he believed that in that case, having proven his strength and courage, he might be recognized as a blue warrior despite his young age and lack of experience. Looking at his opponent, Enshin smiled and said that he was lucky to meet him. After all, now he only has 3 bloody demons left to kill, and he will be one step closer to the title of Blue Warrior. But he became wary, sensing a hidden threat in Enshin's words, like a subtle but unbearable tension. After that, without losing his vigilance, he looked at Enshin with suspicion, feeling that there was something more hidden behind his words. But Enshin, without answering, began to release his energy, and a powerful aura flared up around him, pulsing anxiously in the air. After that, he began to concentrate energy throughout his body. A powerful force permeated every muscle and cell. But suddenly, with all his strength, Enshin attacked. His movements were lightning fast, and the blow left the opponent with minimal chances to counter. He wanted to end the fight quickly, without giving his opponent any chance to counterattack. After all, he understood that the opponent was the center of the Tanlin sect, and the longer the battle lasted, the lower his chances of victory would become. But the bloody demon was already ready to counterattack, his eyes blazing with fire, and every muscle in his body was tense, ready for instant movement. At that time, Enshin began to concentrate his energy on the sword, and the blade lit up with a bright light. Then, with all his strength, he struck it with an unfading radiance, using the first spiral technique. The bloody demon began to groan in pain, his body shuddering, but at the same time, anger flared in his eyes. "I won't even let you have the last word," Enshin said, preparing for the decisive attack. Then, without a moment's hesitation, he struck him with all his strength with his sword, cutting the air like a blade with an invisible river that left no room for doubt. Blood began to spray in all directions, staining the ground around them a dark red. After that, Enshin, sighing, turned and looked at the people around him. His gaze was calm, but there was a cold determination in it. The people of the blood demon were shocked and confused, unable to believe their eyes. When they wanted to run away, Enshin stopped them with a look and ordered them not to move. His gaze was terrifying, yet confident and focused, as if he could see their every move. His gaze sent goosebumps down their skin, and cold sweat broke out on their foreheads as they felt all the power radiating from Enshin. After some time, the people whom Enshin had saved came up to him and sincerely thanked him. Their eyes radiated gratitude and respect for him giving them a chance at life. With tears in his eyes, the guide also thanked them because their unfortunate women could now calm down. But Enshin drew attention to the girl in his arms. Xi'an was supposed to be under the protection of the Zhongnan sect. How could this even be allowed? The guide did not understand. Then the guide saw Enshin's gaze, which was looking at the girl with deep sympathy, and sighed heavily. After which the leader continued to say that there is a war going on now, and in such times even the strongest sectors cannot always provide full protection to their members. The war is raging between Zhongnan and the Tyrant Sword sect, and it has now engulfed not only territories, but also the hearts of people, forcing even those who usually stay away to participate in this bloody conflict. And all of Zhongnan's soldiers who were patrolling their city returned to their mountain, leaving the city without proper protection, which became another reason for fear among the local residents. Evening came, and Enshin walked back to the hotel where the master and the others were staying. He was lost in thought, thinking that if the enemy was the Sword Tyrant sect, then Zhongnan had to muster all his strength to confront such a powerful opponent. But he feared that killing a few blood demons wouldn't change the situation significantly. Then he stopped and remembered his brothers and younger sister, their faces that were always before him. But he decided that he needed to help Zhongnan, because only by joining forces could he give a worthy rebuff to the Tyrant Sword sect and secure a future for those he loved and felt responsible for. The 13 Heavens Group is a powerful organization that sought to dominate Marima using its resources, influence, and strength. The Desert Fortress would be forced to act sooner or later, and so, by joining them as the Tyrant Sword sect, he thought that no one would object to his decisive actions. And he also thought that maybe he would be able to find a trace of Tugui. But suddenly his thoughts were abruptly interrupted by the rustling of footsteps in the bushes, signaling someone's approach. Enshin instantly became alert, his attention shifting to the sounds. From there, the disciple Yu Hyun and Master Choju of the Hwasan sect emerged. Upon seeing Enshin, they stopped instantly, their steps becoming uncertain, and their eyes met his gaze, filled with determination. "It seems that Thanlan is already finished," Master Choju said. Enshin confirmed his guesses with a brief nod, then apologized. But the masters were amazed by his fighting skills. Their speed and accuracy were at an incredibly high level. Looking at his abilities, he felt like he had witnessed the future leader of Magwanig. Or even the new leader of the Divine Sword Squad. The future of the Desert Fortress is very transparent. Yu Hyun remembered what he said about 5 seconds, and admitted that his words were rash, after which he apologized. Enshin listened attentively to his words, each of which seemed to carry more weight than the previous one, but at the same time he did not know how to respond correctly. And Yu Hyun suggested starting over, hoping that this would help put past misunderstandings behind them. He believed they could discuss a lot about Hwasan fighting techniques. After all, these skills were extremely effective and could be useful to each of them, especially since their clans are not far from each other. "I won't climb mountains for this," Enshin said. With these words, he completely confused Yu Hyun, because he absolutely did not expect such a reaction. Yu Hyun's eyes widened in surprise, and he was speechless for a moment, not knowing how to react to such an unexpected answer. But Enshin understood that he could be chased away if he came, but it was better not to come empty-handed. After some time, when night was already beginning to fall on the city, Enshin finally arrived at the hotel. He stood focused and serious before the master and the others. Their gazes were fixed on him, and there was a silence in the air, as if everyone was waiting to see what he would say next. Bai noticed deep wounds on his back, evidence of his ordeal, and without a moment's hesitation, she decided to apply a healing balm to him, hoping to ease the pain and speed up the healing process. The master, without looking up, seriously inquired about the status of the task. His eyes were penetrating and demanding, as if he were looking for the smallest details that could indicate the quality of the work. But Enshin, sighing, took the bag from his shoulder and placed it on the table. The bag was heavy, and when he opened it, everyone fell silent. They were stunned by what they saw, their gazes were blank with shock, and everyone was speechless, unable to even utter a word at the moment when the incomprehensible became reality before their eyes. In the bag he placed on the table was the head of the bloody demon killed by Enshin. Everyone present froze in silence, not believing their eyes. And it wasn't just anyone, but a bloody demon with a sword, his head, placed on the table, was evidence that Enshin had indeed won a victory over one of his most fearsome enemies. And this was proof that his past achievements were not just a lucky coincidence, they were the result of his determination, strength, and skill. This was again a demon from the Bloodflame sect, and again a defeated demon who is considered to be the owner of unusual techniques. The contribution of a lightning-fast genius, his contribution is invaluable, because he always exceeds their expectations. His ability to instantly adapt to any situation and find the most effective solutions made him irreplaceable. Accomplishing a mission, obtaining important information, and the head of an enemy are all highly valued in Murimi. It is not just a physical victory, but a strategic move that shows strength, courage, and agility in combat. Enshin listened to him silently, listening intently to every word, his mind focused on what had been said and what still remained to be said. But Enshin gathered his thoughts, because he had something important to say. He understood that the moment was very important, and he needed to formulate his words correctly. But suddenly, Enshin, with cold determination in his voice, declared that he intended to go to Jongnan.